I'm speaking with Kathleen Sullivan from Tennessee, a survivor of mind control. Thanks very much for joining us on this radio series, Kathleen.
Thanks for inviting me.
How did you become aware that you were being used or under the influence of mind control?
I'm going to backtrack just a little bit to fit all this in. I first started realizing that I did not have a lot of memories from my childhood and from my adult years, and I also was learning that I did not have an awareness of most of my emotions back in summer of 1990 when I went to a place called Crossroads of Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was a codependency treatment program that I entered because my daughter had been arrested for some serious charges, and they wanted me to get some extra help because they figured it was probably family generational. And I started remembering that I had been sexually abused by my father at home, as had several other siblings. And I went home and started telling the authorities and was preparing to testify against him. And I started realizing that he was not the man I thought he was, that I had a real fantasy about who he was as my father. When that started to break, I started to have a lot of abreactions, which was like physical memories paired with emotional memories of having been tortured by him at home and also used in voyeurism-type sexual acts with him as a child. He was suicided in January of 1990. I was made to watch. When that happened, I totally shut down inside and became very robotic, very out of touch with my emotions, and I entered a hospital in Atlanta and went in another treatment program there, they called it intensive experiential track, which was a more legal name as far as insurance companies go for codependency treatment again. I started having more memories of other types of trauma I had been through. Got out of that, then I started having ritual abuse memories, and I'm finding out this is usually a normal process. You'll remember the sexual abuse first, then the ritual abuse, then the other stuff finally comes up. I went in another hospital in 91, summer of 91, out in Dallas, and that's where I finally began to accept what I was beginning to remember, and that's that I had been programmed by the government, U.S. government, to be used to be an assassin as well as to do some other jobs for them. It was a very difficult time for me because I was absolutely terrified that as I remembered I was going to be killed. And I also was having a problem in the hospital with being homicidal towards the people there, nurses and staff. And it was a real interesting couple of months for all of us, I think. I started learning that I had many, many, many other personalities and fragments of my original personality. Each one had a name or a code number or a code name. And I've been working at it ever since. It's been a real interesting experience so far.
Did you initially, did something trigger your memories initially, and did they started coming before your father had died?
Yeah, they did. I think when I was in Crossroads, being physically safe, probably for the first time in my life. At that place, I was not even allowed to accept phone calls or cards from relatives. And they did that because when they did that type of codependency treatment, they wanted the patients to focus solely on their own stuff that was inside and not be taken away mentally or emotionally from the recovery work they were doing. So it was a really important month for me there. Plus, as I started to remember, and it's really neat because nobody put it in my head. In fact, I kept telling all the staff there that my dad was a wonderful man, that he was, just, oh gosh, he was just like Norman Rockwell. You can imagine one of those pictures. And they kept going, but why are you so shut down emotionally? We had explored maybe it was alcoholism in my family. No. I had no memory of sexual abuse, and I was just trying to figure out what was it, what was causing this in me. And then one time I went to see a Batman movie on Pass with a group from the unit, and that movie for some reason started it. I came back to the unit and just had, oh my gosh, I was just hysterical. I could not stop crying. I had a major headache, which I also learned since then means that some alter personalities are starting to come out. I had this need inside to run away and hide where no one could find me. It was a real tough time, but it was like I was starting to open up there. And I had also had a falling out with my father previous to that, which was a first for me, because my daughter had been arrested, and he was, I think, trying to cover his tracks by making it look like she was crazy or whatever. And so I was also breaking his control of me at the same time. And then by being willing to testify against him, that was breaking his control even further. And then when he was killed, that broke it the rest of the way.
So when you were testifying against your father, this was strictly for the sexual abuse?
Right, because he had 3 children from a second marriage. And one of them came forward. We have never talked about that, even now. And what I had remembered independently about Dad doing to me and my other siblings in the bathroom when I was a child was identical to what Dad did to this sibling and a younger sibling, well, half-siblings, 30 years later. So it was pretty amazing how he was still doing the same techniques. But that was the beginning of breaking free and remembering for me. I was, before he died, I was having, like, flashbacks 24 hours a day, it seemed, during my dreams and during my waking state. And fortunately, I had some therapists working with me who taught me to journal everything. And I've been journaling ever since, and it's been a big help to me.
And when you were receiving these memories, how did they come back, like in terms of via different senses, or how did your memories come back to you? And
a lot of times I would hear a sound that wasn't in the room, and I recognized that because it wasn't in the room, it was a sound memory starting to come up, or that part of a memory. Sometimes I would hear somebody talking to me, my father, or a voice of another person that a lot of times I could recognize from my childhood. Sometimes it would be a certain smell, or a lot of times when I was eating, all of a sudden the food looked extremely unappetizing. I had a lot of physical memories of being raped when nothing was happening physically at that time. It was all body memory. I had a lot of visual memories, and then I started having some very, very recurring dreams that when I started writing them and allowed myself to explore that part of what was coming up in my mind, I would sometimes spend hours and hours, sometimes a half a day, just sitting there writing what came up and reliving it as I wrote, and believe me, that was not fun either. But it was really neat, because even now I can look back at a lot of that stuff and go, wow, yeah, this really did happen. It's been amazing.
So what you're saying, your father was basically carrying out trauma-based conditioning on you.
Right.
And at what point did you become aware that this was being done for the purpose of mind control? Or
that again was in the summer of '91. It wasn't until I remembered the government connection and remembered that I had been used as an assassin. And understand, this was back before. I'm fortunate on this in a way, because the memories came up and the personalities, alter personalities, came out before I was able to find information about these types of activities. So I was feeling really crazy when that stuff came out. I wanted to believe that I had made it all up, but then I thought, oh my gosh, if I made all this up, or even subconsciously, then I'm really crazy. So it was a real difficult time. But and I went back and forth in denial a lot. But when the information kept coming up and the alter personalities kept coming out very insistently, I realized that I couldn't keep denying it, because if something that serious had been done to me and I had been used to do it, then I was in danger presently. And the more I would accept this stuff and accept these other alter personalities and fuse with them, the better I'd be aware of what was going on around me now.
And how did you go about verifying your memories at the time you started remembering government involvement and being used? It
was very, very, very hard. One of of course, what I tried to do was find information where this had been done to people before. At that time, the information was extremely limited. I did run across John Mark's Manchurian Candidate. That helped a little bit. I was able to get a hold of Walter Boerk's original, Xerox copy of his original Operation Mind Control. And there was a chapter in there about a woman, I believe her code name was Candy.
Candy Jones.
It showed how she had been used to do a lot of the same things, too, even at a place I had already remembered that I knew as the farm. Well, it was called the farm. It may have been Camp Perry. I have not bothered to try and go there to identify it visually. But a lot of the same techniques I had been remembering, she had mentioned being used on her and through her. One of the things that she had mentioned was cyanide with lipstick. I had been remembering using like a little container of Vaseline with biochemical substances on it and then poking or scratching someone with a pin with that. So there were enough similarities to where I again started to feel sane. At that time, I also was very desperate. I started reading a book called The Man Who Knew Too Much by Richard Russell, and I wrote to him and just shared a little bit of my story, and he did acknowledge that from his understanding, yes, this stuff was still going on, and just hang in there. And so I did a lot of hanging in there. Then I started, back in 91, I had remembered 5 main systems of programming that had been used on me. It came out totally spontaneously. A psychiatrist at the hospital in Dallas simply asked each of the patients in a group, he said, we want you to write down maps of your systems. And I just sat down and it just came out on paper. It was alpha, beta, delta, theta, and omicron. And no one bothered to explain what all that was. I did not know any other patients there at the time that wrote that specific information down. But I went ahead and explored what this meant in altered states. A lot of it was pure visualization that had been externally put in my mind through hypnosis and other means. And not understanding what any of this really meant, except for what little I could remember at the time, I just kept journaling and documenting it as best as I could. I think it was like back in 93, I had written a letter to Daniel Ryder, who wrote Breaking the Circle of Satanic Ritual Abuse. Mm-hmm. And he had mentioned something in there about governmental mind control. So I wrote him a letter and said, I have these systems of programming, and it looks like I have used as an assassin and some other things. And I just needed to know that other people had at least heard of this so I could still feel relatively sane.
Right. Now, when you say systems of programming, what do you mean by that? And maybe you could explain what each of these are, a few of them are.
I'm not claiming that I understand all of this myself, okay? I think only a programmer can really understand it all. But what they did, and my father, I might add, was my primary programmer from my childhood on. He was a sociopath because of some horrible things he went through in his own childhood that I have found out about. So he had no conscience left at all about anything he did. He was also a pedophile, a person who preferred sex with children. So I got hit on that end pretty hard, too. He was an engineer for AT&T, formerly Western Electric, and he was an absolute genius in what he did for them. He worked a lot with blueprints. He was very scientifically minded, and I think that probably was his self-esteem right there. He loved puzzles, he loved games, and he loved seeing how he could create, or I should say how many altered states he could create in one individual. He used me, and he told me a number of times that he was God to me, and for a while I really believed it. He told me that I was his guinea pig, and I do believe that, and that I was his prototype, because as many as he could create in me successfully and document each part of me that he broke off and gave a code name to, that would make him look even better with the CIA, who he mainly was working for.
How would he go about creating it?
He would. There was a number of ways that he did it. He was a true sadist. He even wrote a paper once on Marquis de Sade, I believe it was, or Sade,
Right.
and I found that several years after he died and went, this figures, okay. I guess because of a lot of the pain that he carried inside that he hadn't dealt with from his own childhood, and it was extreme. I could see it sometimes when he would dissociate. He liked to inflict pain on others, and he would sometimes use electrical wires because he was an electrical, mechanical, and chemical engineer. He was. I still have a problem most of all with electricity. I cannot stand being near a bare wire. It'll make me nuts. Even if the electricity is turned off, you can't convince me it's turned off. He used sleep deprivation. He used holding food back. He used rituals extensively. He headed up a small, covert satanic cult in Reading, Pennsylvania. Very small group, but they brought a lot of kids in for rituals and stuff, and orgies and things like that. That right there did some serious stuff to my head. I was made to participate in ritual sacrifices from the time I was 4 years old. What I'm realizing, and I think it's important for people to realize, that a lot of the stuff may not just be ritual abuse. It may actually be training and conditioning for ops for some people to be used later on, because later on, the implements that were used in those ritual sacrifices, I was able to use in assassinations with absolutely no problem whatsoever. The things I saw in the rituals, and I don't have to get into all of that, but anyone working in the emergency room will know what I'm talking about, okay? That also helped me to desensitize later on when I was involved in assassinations. The desensitization, I think, was very important. But what he did, he kept a real close eye on me as much as he could, either in the rituals or at home where he was doing a lot of the torture, basically, that he did to me. And he would, what he'd do is he'd have the main part of me that was known as Kathy at the time be out and present consciously in control of the body. Then he would traumatize that main part of me, the original part of me, and so that part simply could not bear the pain or the horror anymore. That part would kind of just go to sleep. I guess that would be self-hypnosis, and just totally black out amnesically. Then he would do something else to me to where I had to come back, but I couldn't bear it as Kathy. So he would split off a part, and then he would give that part a name, and just really mess with each part's head. that made sense. It's really all one head. But what he did was, when parts of me split off that had no memory of the Kathy part of me, those other parts were what he called a clean slate. In other words, they had no memory, and so he could make them believe anything he wanted to. He called it imprinting, because it was whatever beliefs he chose for those parts to believe, that's what he would imprint them mentally and emotionally with. He did it to a lot of other children. I was not the only one. He was, that was one of his specialties was splitting off children's psyches and doing what he called base programming, which was assigning their names and such, and then other people would do more specific programming to them later.
So,
but he chose to try and do more specific programming with me as well, just to show what he could do.
and this base programming is a result of being exposed to trauma
Absolutely.
to cause dissociation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's many different ways that it can happen, like the beta system of me. The reason I call it system, some people will just have one part that's named beta, okay? And I need to add that there's a lot of MK survivors who do not have this particular programming. They have other types of programs because other people were trying other experimental techniques on them and trying to create other types of altered personalities and programs. My dad was, specializing in this area.
Your dad must have learned these techniques from somewhere. Where do you feel that he was taught? Or it sounds like also your father was a victim of abuse or perhaps mind control as well.
I believe he was. I'm going to have to be kind of general on some of this
Sure.
because there's some things I'm not really safe talking about yet,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll say as much as I can comfortably. All On the other side of my family, there is some white Russian connections. These are people that are extremely anti-communism. So they were involved in some of this in a more primitive way. Like one of the older male relatives would torture my dad by applying electricity to his many fillings in his teeth. So that person had a great, great influence on what happened to me, my dad, my entire family. That person is unfortunately still alive, or I would name him. He seemed to have, now he told me, this person, that he had OSS connections and had been with the OSS during World War II. He seemed to have a lot of connections to politicians in D.C. as well, and to another person who I wish I could name, initials HK, who I learned had actually been involved in bringing over a lot of the Nazi criminal scientists from Germany at the end of World War II and later on. My dad told me that my father, had been used as an interpreter with some of these scientists that were brought over by the Army. I think it was Combined Army and Air Force back then. I can't remember the name of it. And OSS, which soon became CIA. I thought about this, why my dad became so influenced by those people, if that's true, and I finally realized something a couple weeks ago. My dad had a strong German background, okay? He was growing up in an era where to be a German was just a filthy thing, because Germans were considered the enemies. His mother would play German radio stations at night, but I can see why he had a very, very difficult time, plus he already had low self-esteem, severely so. So I can see now why he might have gotten emotionally close to some of these people if he did interpret for them. He spent a lot of time at different Air Force bases, at least a 4-year period in the Air Force. Quite a few bases. It was surprising how many. Later on, he spent a lot of time around people who were, some people call them neo-Nazi, I call them Aryans, people that were involved with Aryan-type organizations and activism and such. So it looks like somebody kind of woke up that part of his sense of having a self-purpose, being important, being special. He became pretty obsessed with Teutonic belief systems. He and some other men that he was close to called themselves Knight Templars. As far as I know, Dad was never in the Masons, although most of the other people I knew were pretty high level. Their meaning for Knight Templar was Germanic assassins. I, as a female, since they were total chauvinists, was not considered a Knight assassin, but they would call me daughter of Knight Templar. So there's something there. He also went to, Albright College, which is like right outside Reading, Pennsylvania, and graduated from there before he started working for Western Electric, and they had a strong German group there too. He was in some German clubs and such. So I'm not sure where all the influences came from, but they were pretty strong, and I think it gave him an identity that he was pretty needy for.
As you're probably aware, there's quite a debate in public about the recovered memories versus false memories. Mm-hmm. How, in your experience, did you feel that a memory was real or not, and what kind of problems are associated with remembering in terms of trying to figure out exactly what happened to you?
For me, it was, and still is, very hard work doing that. One of the things that I learned very fast as I was remembering the op memories was that it looks like every single time, without fail, whenever I completed an op, especially overseas ones, which mostly I did overseas ops for the CIA and another organization as well, when I came back, I would be debriefed, and immediately they would start doing what I call screen memories and scrambles. Screen memories and scrambles can be two different things. Screen memories are where they put an entire separate memory in the mind to that when you start remembering, you'll hit the screen memory first. it is an actual memory in that it did happen, but not physically, usually. What it usually was for me was they would put me in a room where there was a movie projector, or later on they used virtual reality, which made it even worse because there was more of a sense of it being real. Sometimes they would drug me. Sometimes one of my handlers would sit there and be talking to me and narrating and hypnotizing me as I was watching the movie. A lot of times they tried to pick out movies that had some similarities to what I had just experienced, which means they had prepared for it in advance, I'm assuming. Other times they would use horror movies I have never seen before. They were that bad. I mean, we're talking like X-rated sometimes. And so I would hit those movie memories, and I would just like, what in the heck is this? This makes no sense whatsoever. I would feel really crazy, and then I go, okay. I remember that there was a man sitting to the right of me. I remember that I was sitting in a seat. I was looking up at a screen. Aha, this is a movie. And then I go, okay, now, and what I would do and still do is I'll write down the entire thing I remember and who was near me and stuff. From then, I could backtrack or I could go forward from that point. Now, scrambles was more where I would be like with a group of people or with a handler, and they would put me under hypnosis and make me see something out of the whole thing that was real. They would make me see one thing that absolutely was not. Like, and one friend of mine, she would see a kangaroo in a guard shack. It obviously was not a kangaroo. But that's the kind of things they would do. They also did what my dad really liked for them to do, because it involved all the tactile sensations, which made the false memories seem even more real, was what he called acted out scenarios. And that's where they would go ahead and take the victim, the MK victim, to a location. They would have people scripted just like they were acting on TV or something, and make the person think that that situation actually happened. Sometimes they would even bring in a well-known Hollywood actor here and there, pay them pretty well. I think some of them are probably blackmailed, and I think some of them are also victims themselves. But when a person would remember that stuff, that also would make them feel real crazy to actually remember absolutely an actor that was on TV and such. The other thing that they would do as far as screen memories was a lot of times after all that was done and they were transporting me back home, a lot of times it was through Dobbins Air Force Base, they would transport me to a place in Cobb County, which was where the main cult was that my dad was connected to near the end, and make me participate in a ritual after everything else. So here I would remember, first I'd have to work through a legit ritual memory. Then I'd have to work through a screen or scramble or both. Then I might be lucky and get to the real memory. And fortunately for me, they were pretty predictable that way, but it took me several years to realize what was happening and why the memories were coming up this way. So in that way, I do think there is a legitimacy to what people talk about false memories, but I do not think of it as people making it up consciously or subconsciously. I consider it to be externally induced false memories. Mm-hmm. Let me add one more thing here. Mm-hmm. I was talking to someone the other day. They mentioned how one of the reasons the McMartin case was thrown out was because the kids had mentioned that they were raped by Santa Claus. It was a man dressed up as Santa Claus with the beard. They were telling the truth, okay? But the jury, I believe, found them incredible because of that. Some kids in Cobb County had shared that they had been used in bestiality with lions. That one was real. But again, people could not believe that that happened, and therefore the kids were considered incredible. Sometimes they will actually bring in things that are legit and are real, but it's so beyond what people can comprehend that humans can do to humans that they're considered incredible.
So do you feel it was purposely done that way to discredit the survivors of it?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And to make them feel insane and to feel hopeless, because if your memories aren't real and yet they keep coming up, it's enough to make you want to die. It really is a lot of times. And that's very scary.
Do you feel that some of the memories of the ritual abuse may have been staged in your experience?
I wish. Unfortunately, I have witnesses. Now, most of them are children, and they're not about to talk about it because they're trying to get on with their own lives, too. But unfortunately, my dad and this other leader in Cobb County later on were very, very sadistic, They seemed to enjoy doing what they did. And yes, unfortunately here it was real, but I have also communicated with other survivors who, when they sat down and did like I did and kind of looked around in their memory, they were shown films of rituals. So what I'm beginning to realize is probably a lot of the real rituals are filmed, and then the films are used on some victims as ritual abuse memories that are mostly films. So I think there's both.
And when you said it was becoming predictable in terms of, was there a pattern to how they had traumatized you in terms of programming?
Yes, thank goodness, yes. The other thing that they would do also was when I would get, okay, let's just say there were some handlers that didn't seem real comfortable working with me because I had Delta programming, which was kill programming. I think they got afraid sometimes. So the other thing they would do a lot of times is apply a stun gun to my body. And what that does is wipe out about 20 minutes of memory if it's held to the muscle long enough. And that would also wipe out part of a transportation memory or coming out of a building, getting into a vehicle or something like that. So that actually was pretty predictable, too. And I had a police officer in Atlanta look at my arms one time, and I didn't even tell him what I was looking for, and he saw the stun gun marks all over the place. And I had already seen them, and I figured what they were, but it was kind of still upsetting to hear a verification from an officer.
So how did that help you in terms of your recovery to have that pattern there in terms of your
It helped me
conditioning?
feel sane.
I'm sorry?
It helped me feel sane. And it helped me to realize that these people are not God, that they are limited in even their creativity, that they had to go by patterns, I'm realizing, because they had to do a lot of the same things in order to keep things smooth, keep it efficient, not waste a whole lot of time. I want to mention one more thing about movies. There was something else that happened. Okay, there's a theater in D.C. that is actually called Janus, Janus. I have received information, although I cannot personally verify it. I have pictures of the theater, too, that it is CIA-owned. If that's true, then that may be one of the theaters I was taken to. They said, the investigator I talked to said, seems like it's hardly ever used. And yet, like even just paying taxes, and it's an odd place, okay? Theaters I was taken to, too, when there was a team of operatives that came back, they would do something codenamed Cybertron. And what they would do, they would show a movie, and they would have us just scream and yell and everything at the characters on the big movie screen. And what that did was help us, our emotions to diffuse, so that when we went back home, we had gotten it all out in the movie theater. So they did that, too. So sometimes it was group screen memories that they did, and it still worked. It's amazing.
What other kind of covers do you feel that the perpetrators of mind control have used to cover their tracks?
Well, there's one man who used to reprogram me in Atlanta. He would actually dress up in female costumes sometimes with wigs and dresses in the whole 9 yards. I knew a number of men that would actually dress in female outfits with wigs and such. It was silly how they did that because, they didn't look right, and it wasn't too hard to figure. And then you'd remember the same face and go, oh, my goodness, I can't believe he did that. People probably thought they were, drag queens or something. The other big problem I ran into was that most of these people would use aliases religiously. Very few of them didn't. Only the ones who were very high level, very well known, did not. I guess partly because they were it'd be so easy to identify them, and partly because I think they were hoping that people would never believe that they had been involved in this stuff and, try and make some of us look like, like Apollo Jones or something like, yeah, we're just lying to get money or whatever.
So you're talking about public figures.
Right. And believe me, I'm for Paula Jones, okay? But I know that I think they were just banking on that, first of all, enough of us would die, okay, through suicide programming especially, or just give up or go back to the cults and such. I don't think they expected this many of us to be recovering and waking up and getting angry.
Mm-hmm. And when you were going through your healing process and your recovery. What resources of therapy were available to you, and what did you kind of seek out at that time?
It was awfully limited. Okay, this is one thing I really wish that would come back into vogue, although I know some survivors went to codependency treatment centers and got reprogrammed at them. Some, okay? There's always going to be places that are kind of scuzzy compared to good ones. But the one I went to was excellent because it has helped me so many times to know that when my body is responding a certain way, now I know what I'm feeling and I know what to do with the energy of those feelings. That is incredibly important because as an assassin, they compartmentalize my rage from my childhood, and I have had tremendous rage come out. I've had to do a lot of anger work, which also is very, very helpful. But knowing in advance what is coming up in me helps me to be safer and for those around me to be a lot safer because then I know what to do with that emotion. So I think that is the very first thing that I wish all survivors would learn, and unfortunately most of them do not. I went to one hospital, which unfortunately may not have great connections anymore, out in Denver. No, it was not Columbine. But I worked with a doctor there who had lost family in concentration camps during World War II, so he was aware of the atrocities that humans will do to humans if they think they can get away with it and if they're very wounded in their own selves. That was very helpful to me because when I talked to that person, that doctor, he did not go in denial. The biggest help I've had is talking to people who do not go in denial about this stuff and are not willing to believe, but just, understand that things really can get this bad between humans. That was also where I first found out, although I kind of knew before and I had been kind of hinting around to people that I thought I had alter personalities. That's where I got it confirmed. And it was a real safe place for me because I was able to let little child alter personalities come out, walking around with a teddy bear and a robe, And that was very important, too, because when such alter personalities come out, they come out the way they went under. And I can't expect them to act my physical age, and it just does not work. There was one person that I did work with for a year and a half on some deprogramming techniques. Unfortunately, that does not seem to be a healthy situation anymore, but that person did give me some good clues on what to look for inside as far as when memories start coming up. But as far as verifications there, I had to do that work on my own. And I've had files and files and files on the different people that I've remembered that I have been able to identify and get information on, just tracking their personalities and seeing if it fits what I remembered. And I'm really delighted when one of them acts out in public the way I remembered because I go, here we go. It's just little bitty tiny proofs, but it's very nice.
Was that one person the only person you worked with that had a knowledge of mind control programming?
Unfortunately, yes. Another thing that really has helped me, although I'm not active with it anymore, there's a deprogramming group on the internet. Excellent group. They've had their roller coaster times. New people come on, and it takes a while sometimes because people are not exactly taught social graces, and they have to learn that. That's part of the recovery process. But it has been an outstanding group, and not just anyone can be on it. You have to be legit, and you have to really be wanting to work at it. But the Internet's been real helpful to me because I've been able to write back and forth with other MK survivors, and they've been just a tremendous support, especially in helping me to accept myself. Now, I've had a problem with several therapists who were not able to help me with that because they were struggling with all of this. But when you're talking to people that have already been there, they know it's real, you don't have to deal with that issue with them. And when I remembered that I was used as an assassin, I hated myself for so long, and I was so down on myself, and I thought surely everyone else would hate me too. And they gradually helped me to understand that, no, it's not my fault. And that probably saved my life too.
feel that situation is changing somewhat now in terms of therapists becoming more aware of mind control and adjusting their therapy techniques accordingly?
Absolutely. I do not think there are nearly enough therapists who are willing to work with these types of survivors and are willing to learn the right techniques, which are now available. I hope that gets better. We really desperately need more therapists who will do this. But what few I know of that are aware, who do know how to use the right techniques, and just to listen a lot of times without shutting a person down, making them feel like it wasn't real, because that can throw a person into suicide very quickly as well. I think it's going to get better. I think it's going to get a lot better, but it's going to take a while. But it's a whole lot better already than it was when I started out, because I had literally nobody that understood this stuff starting out, and that was horrible, just horrible. It's one reason that I do go public. It's as much as I do. It's one reason that I try to get information out to survivors about how to deal with some of this stuff, so that they won't have to go through the heartaches I did and the tough times I did as severely. I mean, they're still going to have to, but not to that extent.
How do you feel like groups like the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, their effect on resources available for survivors of mind control?
Oh, gosh. That's a real sore subject for me. I have no doubt that there are some people connected to the False Memory Syndrome Foundation who mean well, who really do not understand yet what is going on, and who some of their associates are even on the board. I do think it is extremely detrimental, because it seems like all the best therapists, all the ones who are willing to help people self-accept, especially, are being shot down one after another, either through harassment, through harassing lawsuits, just being dragged over the coals in the media. I think it is vicious. I think it is absolutely uncalled for. But again, I'm sure there are some people in that organization who really do not know what this is all about. My concern is that several people who are involved strongly with the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. In fact, I just recently heard from an investigator that Julian West is now officially joining. Julian West, excuse me. I think
officially joining,
and this is a personal opinion, I think that the main reason these people are doing it is because their backs are to the wall, because some of these people were involved in MK experimentation on children and others, and they're fighting to keep us from being able to testify against them personally. And again, that's my personal opinion, but it is a very strong one. So I think that if more people understood what some of the motivations are for some of these groups, they'd kind of put some space between themselves and the group. Well,
people like Martin Orn and Louis Jolyon West are well documented as being involved in MK Ultra and the other mind control experimental programs.
Yes, that they still are able to do what they're doing. Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
incredible.
Yeah. I'd like to talk in a general sense of what other kinds of methods were used to condition you or to reinforce your conditioning. And I'd like to start off with how was electricity used?
Okay. Electricity is very powerful. The problem with electricity for me, that and drugs both, and kind of hypnosis in there too, is that it gets beyond conscious barriers. There were certain things that could be done to me, like torture, regular torture, on a certain part of the body that I could mentally block out, or maybe let it hit a part of my brain, but and I don't understand the physical way this is all done. I just know how I did it, okay? I would protect part of my mind from it influencing the rest of my mind. But electricity hits the brain, and there is no way to protect the brain from it because it's hitting that part of the body as well. There is no defense I know of against electricity, especially electroshock therapy. I hate the word therapy connected to that. I know in some cases it is very important. I've seen people who were so bad in depression that if they had not had that, they would have died, for sure. but to call it therapy for people like us is absolutely uncalled for. So I don't know what you would call it, but electroshocks to the head was just a very, very, very powerful way to break me down in every way. Stun guns again. I was absolutely terrified of electricity because it is extremely painful. But for me, it was like sometimes all someone would have to do is hold a stun gun out like they were going to do it, maybe push the button and let the little electrical arc go between the prongs, and I would do anything they said because I was just that terrified. Another thing that they used, there were several other ways they did it. They had a choker type thing. I don't know what you call it, but it was like around my neck where they had like a little box. I guess it was battery operated and remote controlled, and they could shock my throat. In fact, I've had to break through a lot of that this last couple of weeks to be able to do this interview because they conditioned me to believe that they owned my throat and my vocal cords. Another thing they did that was extremely painful, and I still have a lot of very painful body memories, is where they would put a thick belt around my waist, and they would have it on my back, the box, and they would, by remote control, shock my lower spine. Believe me, that will put you on the floor real quick, crawling and begging that they stop and do whatever they say. So that's why I say electricity was one of the worst. But drugs also, they had one particular drug, and it's connected to Curare somehow. In fact, it's got kind of the same name. I can't remember right offhand, but when they would give me that drug, I could still think pretty much. I could see, I could hear, but I could not move my body at all. And they would induce such a sense of helplessness that, again, it was absolutely terrifying knowing that if somebody did something to me, I could not even lift my hand to defend myself. So that drug especially, unfortunately, worked pretty well for me, too. On me, I should say.
How was hypnosis used to your awareness?
I was extremely susceptible to hypnosis because I already preferred to go in an altered state other than face reality that was going on around me. So it was already very easy for me to, going into another altered state sometimes for me was self-hypnosis, okay? I mean, I didn't know what it was, I just did it. So I was already so prone to that when somebody else did it, especially using Ericksonian techniques, I have gotten some confirmation from a therapist that is probably the most powerful form and most effective form of hypnosis that a MK operative can use. I could sit there and somebody would be talking to me, and if they knew certain codes that were used on me previously, sometimes they could be talking to me, and I would see the person's mouth move, and I knew the person was talking to me, but I could not hear the words because the words were hitting another part of my personality that I was still amnesic to. That part of my personality would get orders, and I would not even know what the orders were. This Ericksonian stuff is very, very powerful stuff.
It just goes right to your subconscious. A person could be talking
to me and in a very, very smooth tone, never a raised voice, put me in a hypnotic state to where I would see whatever they wanted me to see at the moment.
Did you feel you were more prone to going into a hypnotic state because of your trauma conditioning?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I've worked very hard on. I have done EEG biofeedback also, which is very triggering if you've been hooked up to those type of monitors and wires before. But it really did help me a lot to learn how to control my trancing out. It's been wonderful that way.
So how does that work in terms of helping you heal?
Okay. The person that I worked with, it specializes in that now. And what she did, she would attach little clips one to each of my earlobes. I mean, there was no electrical current. I need to specify that. Zero electrical current that I would feel, okay? And she would use some kind of glue to attach the little tiny wires to different parts of my head depending on, like the upper back part of my skull is where most of my delta brainwave is centered. the top part of my skull is where the beta brainwave, and which is another reason why they used those Greek letters, because of the actual brainwaves that they were able to activate in different parts of the brain.
So they were utilizing those different parts of the brain with the different systems of programming?
Yeah. I was really shocked when I found that out. Paul Devereaux, who I believe is connected to Stanford SRI, he wrote a book
Earthmind?
Called Earthmind.
Yeah.
And a person I didn't even know handed me that book at a conference once and walked away. And I was like, oh, my God, you know. So I read through that, and it has some excellent explanations about how all this works. Just excellent. I'm real surprised he wrote it. But it's a real good book to find and read about it. But be aware it does have an awful lot of triggers in it, too.
Maybe we could talk at this point about those different systems of programming you mentioned, the alpha, beta, and what they signified. What was involved?
Okay. Well, this is what's fun. Okay. When I wrote Daniel Ryder about this, he got my letter just as he had come back from a conference that I believe Corydon Hammond had been presenting this information at. So what the information that Daniel Ryder got in the letter from me was a verification of what Dr. Hammond had shared at the conference. And then that ended up being a validation to me when he told me that Dr. Hammond had mentioned it at the conference. So it was really neat. It verified two different ways. I have read an article by a man named Mark Phillips in a Patriot newsletter from Florida called Outpost of Freedom. Most of what he wrote in there is pretty accurate about the different kinds of programming, but I'd rather say what I have personally experienced with it. Mm-hmm. Alpha for me was what I call my most basic program, and Dad called it that too. That was the program and the brainwave activated that kind of started all the programming. It's where he would get to me first before he started activating any other parts. Okay. Beta for me. Another word that they used a lot, a code name, was Barbie. As let's just say one person who is a politician heavily involved in this stuff had even told me that Klaus Barbie was the one who originated that name, which later became Beta. And what that pretty much involves is alter personalities that are used for what I knew as quote-unquote sexual servicing of other individuals. I was used both as a child and as an adult in those alter states, and I had more than one. In those alter states, I would not resist. In those alter states, I had no anger. In those alter states, I was an absolute sexual slave and would do whatever I was told to do. I also was not able to respond sexually, not to the same degree as I would normally in a normal conscious state. Delta, for me, had a lot of military connections. I was used pretty extensively in a Delta state with other military personnel or under the orders of other military personnel. In that state, I was absolutely, completely loyal to whoever my quote-unquote superior was. Now, they had a number of subcodes that would activate different parts of that Delta system, like the main one for me, and this is a trigger, so if anyone's listening or reading this and they have Delta programming, please be aware this may. And it was simply Delta 1, 2, 3. But there was other ways that they would use different numbers attached to that word. In that alter state, if they told me to kill somebody in the room, I would kill somebody in the room. I mean, I had absolute loyalty to that person that was in charge. And in that state, I did not think, I'd had a lot of amnesia to where I was dependent on that person pretty much for my survival. And I knew it, and I was used to it pretty quick. I'll say to Delta Theta. That was more into the psychic, and I don't really like the word psychic, by the way. I think that's misused or gives a wrong connotation to a lot of this. It's where they use mental energy from the brain to do a number of things that some people would call psychic. Mark Phillips, the writer of that article, had mentioned that that thetas were called psychic killers, but then he said that the experiments didn't work yes, they did. Somebody gave them some misinformation on that. They definitely did. A lot of times I ran across, and I don't know if other assassin programmers, victims with theta programming have this, but one of the movies and book themes they used extensively for me with theta training was Dune by Herbert, I believe. And if you ever watch the movie or read the book, it won't be too hard to figure, because what they taught us was that we could cause things to happen to other people through and what it was a build-up rage inside. It would come out in the form of pure energy, because we would not allow the rage to be in the forefront. We would just use pure thoughts against another person.
So you wouldn't have a physical manifestation of the rage. It would be a mental...
It would be an energy that would hit them, yeah. They had talked about people imploding internally in their digestive organs and stuff. I don't know, because I can't see what goes on inside another body. And I do know that it does work, because one time after I started remembering this stuff, I went to a grocery store, and a woman, I recognized her and felt threatened by her, and I did it before I realized what I was doing. She ended up on the floor in a coma, and this is really gross, okay? I had a serious emotional meltdown and went and prayed like crazy for her in the bathroom, and I felt so horrible. But eventually I realized that, this is something that if it's in me, I've got to learn to take responsibility and control of it, and mostly by getting my rage out, doing a lot of anger work. And so I don't do that anymore, but there's some rather good things that they did with this theta stuff, too. Some people are involved in remote viewing. They tried that with me, and I don't know if it worked because they didn't tell me the results. But there were times I did seem to be able to see people in other locations and what they were doing, what the furniture looked like and such. For me, a lot of times, even consciously, this stuff would happen, like if a friend was in a hazardous situation or something, and I was notified, I could actually see where the person was and what was happening, and I would use it to pray for the person. I also was, as far as I know, and I don't really like to get into this one now, but I was also used to do hands-on healing. It's quite an experience when there's an energy transfer from one body into the other, when you can feel that flow. There was a cult, I call it a cult, although they'll deny it, called Church of the Living Word, that I was a member of back in, mid-70s, where they practiced this a lot, a whole lot. It was charismatic-type cult, and I was also in several Pentecostal churches where they seemed to do a lot of this stuff, so it kind of kept it going in me. It kind of kept it active, and I learned a lot from it, but I don't know. My problem with this theta stuff is simply that it is very abusive of other people's boundaries. If someone asked me to lay hands on them for healing, I would consider doing it, okay? But I would let them know that I need to know that they're comfortable with it, that they really, really want it, and I really don't like doing it much anymore because it just kind of spooks me too much.
Well, there's been a fair amount of information coming out about the Soviets' research into these kind of areas, and along with United States at Stanford University in terms of remote viewing. And how do you remember how it felt in terms of using this kind of technology? Did it feel like you were having an out-of-body experience, or? Absolutely.
It was really rather fascinating. I think one of the things I've been finding out, and little bits and pieces I heard from those people, was that one reason that survivors of childhood abuse and or survivors who had generational abilities to do this stuff, like I had a Swedish grandmother who was a healer in that area. She did what she called pain drawing. Now, I've not gotten any confirmation that it was called that by the Swedes, but that's what she told me it was when I was a little girl. I would be tortured, and then she would come to me and put her hands on me and literally draw the pain energy into her own body. And it was the darndest thing. So she actually taught me how to do some of that.
Well, it seems like the really unfortunate thing with a lot of this kind of mind control, with using the mental energies and the energies within ourselves, within our minds and brains, is that it can be used for such positive things, but it seems to have been used a lot in very destructive ways.
It was like anything else. It can be used for good or bad. I always think about the atomic bomb when I think about that. Splitting the atom can be wonderfully used, but these people went and used it to kill others. The thing I'm running across right now, talking to other survivors about the theta stuff, is that a lot of people have not been comfortable talking about it because the public is being told that it didn't work, that such experiments were shut down because they didn't work, etc. And yet they really did. And what I'm figuring is that certain elements of our government and the Canadian government, I'm sure, wanted to keep it to themselves. Basically, I think that's all it was.
As a secret
what
weapon.
I was taught, and I will say this much, James Jesus Angleton, who was a director of operations, I believe, for the CIA when I was a little girl.
Yeah, he was
He
director
was one
of...
of the people that taught me a lot about this stuff. And one of the things that he taught me was that anyone can do this. This is not, although people who had the generational tendency, who were raised up to believe that, yes, it can happen, so they don't have these mental blocks that, no, I can't, or it's demonic, or whatever, they're more able to do it quickly and purely, which is very important as well. If you have a lot of doubts about it and confused and worried, it doesn't work too well. But I read an article once by a well-known psychic who also said he doesn't like the word psychic, and he said the same thing, and I thought it was great. He said, anyone can do this. So I think it would be wonderful if more people could learn to use it for good, for healing, and not take advantage of it. But it's like with anything else. If there's people that learn about it, there's also going to be an element of our society who will try and use this for nefarious purposes.
Yeah. Well, the word psychic kind of connotates something that's outside of our bodies and something foreign to the human experience, when it is
Right.
very much, it seems to be very
Right.
much part of it, but very, as you say, not a lot of people know how to use their own mental energies.
Right. One of the this is kind of cute. Okay, spent a lot of time in churches. They used a lot of scriptural programming on me as well to keep me in line through guilt and all that. One of the things a lot of churches, the pastors will teach from pulpits, is that what was done during the New Testament era by the so-called disciples and stuff is not available to people now because we're in a different dispensation is the word they would use. And so I can see even where in churches people are discouraged from exploring this part of their brain because they're told that we can't, but we can, okay? It's very human. It's not frightening. I think it'll be more comfortable when more people are aware of this stuff. But for a lot of people it is frightening right now because it's not something that's talked about very much. Except, like people that really promote it, for money and stuff.
Now, you mentioned James Jesus Angleton, who was the director of counterintelligence for the CIA.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Mm-hmm. How did you become involved with him and talking about this and learning from him?
My dad and him seem to be awfully close. In some ways I really don't like to talk about. Anyway, he treated me very oddly. He talked to me like I was an adult. He didn't seem to like children at all. But all I can figure, and I'm always analyzing these people because it helps me to understand their motives better. His middle name was Jesus, and he used Jesus in the New Testament as the model for this. One of the things he kept telling me is where Jesus Christ, according to the Scripture, said that what he did, we can do more of, or do more. And he said he took that literally. He took that scientifically, where Jesus Christ said that if you say to a mountain, be cast into the sea, it will be cast into the sea if you have enough faith. And what he was teaching me was if I have enough faith in my brain. And so, in a way, I am glad that he taught me some of these things. I don't like what some of it was used for, but he took it very, very seriously, and I understand why, because even as far as the remote viewing, oh man, the things you can do with that in spycraft is outstanding, Even just like being in a room with somebody and being able to pick up on their thoughts, or know when somebody has a physical illness without even them knowing it yet. It's amazing what they can do with this stuff.
And how would people go about learning more about this, or how they can develop?
I really don't know, unless you want to be an MK victim.
No, thanks.
I don't know people yet who do this and are comfortable with it. I will eventually. I think it's pretty new information yet, but I think the more people talk about it, I've talked to a number of people who have told me in private that they've had things like this happen to them in their lives, but they've been so afraid to tell anybody because they thought that they would be considered demonically possessed. I especially run into that one in people that are, Christian. But I think that the more people learn that it's not evil, that it's not supernatural, that it is a human thing, I think there's a lot more people that are already doing this than they realize. A lot more.
I'd like to talk about, just before, was there another system, you mentioned Omicron as well? Did you want to talk about that?
Let's see. Omicron. That was a system specially created for the mafia. I did receive a verification from Corridon Hammond's information, which was pretty fascinating to me, getting that kind of a validation. It also scared the pants off me. I was like, oh my God, not the mob. Yes. I've had memories of mob figures that my dad knew ever since I was a very little girl, and being introduced to a lot of them. One investigator that I talked to, when I described how these people looked, some of the places that my dad met them, he said, well, that would have been the Colombo crime family. That was up in the Pennsylvania area in New York City. Whether I'm assuming he had no reason to lie to me about that, and I'm not going to go asking their bosses, okay? I also spent time at a place called Mar-a-Lago. That was a code name. Ted Gunderson advised me that the full name for that resort in the Florida Keys is actually Marina del Lago. And what's weird about this is Donald Trump's getaway place in Florida is, let's see, Marina del Lago. I'm like, whatever, okay? But Tropicante, that family, they owned that facility. And I've had numerous memories of going down there. So what I ran into a lot was that the mob would do a lot of stateside illegal activities and are involved in, oh my gosh, so many different kinds of underground illegal businesses, tons and tons. And they had their own system in me, so that when they wanted to use me, it was Omicron. And it was pretty simple. I've seen some other children of mob figures on TV and stuff that I've very easily identified as also being under mind control. So I think what it boils down to is simply that the mob does not want the people that they use to do like drug couriering and hits or whatever to remember who they did it for. So it is very much to their benefit that, as it was for these other agencies, that the MK victims would not remember to be able to testify someday. Very simple.
It seems like from the testimony of survivors of mind control that they have been used for a lot of different types of criminal activity.
Oh yeah.
Can you tell us what you remember of how you were used by the mafia?
The mafia.
Just in a general sense.
Understand there was a lot of crossovers here between the CIA, the mafia, and several other intelligence and federal agencies, including the Pentagon. A lot of times they did things together, okay? I can do this. I made a list a while back of different things that I had been used in, and again, there's a lot of crossovers here between the different organizations. One thing I did learn was that back during World War II, the OSS and the military recruited a lot of mob figures, especially out of Italy, to do actual spying for them on the governments that they were trying to get more information from and of. So I assume that, some of the personal friendships between some of the operatives and some of the mob figures probably continued, and I can't help but wonder if that's possibly why a lot of this mob stuff is connected and is still being covered up. Okay, here's a list of some things I was used for. In smuggling, believe it or not, I was used to help smuggle missiles, small ones. Krugerrands, which I learned are often used because they cannot be traceable, or at least could not. They didn't have any code numbers, ID numbers on them. Diamonds, drugs, and unfortunately they used me to transport children to pedophiles and such a lot. I was used to do bodyguarding for politicians and other dignitaries. I also bodyguarded children of several politicians. In situations like that, again, they would prefer to use MK victims because when these politicians and other dignitaries were involved in illegal activities, they would rather have bodyguards that would not be able to testify. Okay, I was used in many different kinds of assassinations. So many, too many. I couriered mental messages between heads of state, including one president, quite a bit. Again, the reason for that was because they expected that I would not remember. Plus, especially in those situations, whenever I would remember that suicide programming would kick in and I would have to fight not dying because they did not want those messages remembered especially. I helped my dad program children. I helped train children how to fight. So I guess that was for future ops that they were going to be used in. I was used in hostage interventions, especially where there was a kidnapping and they didn't want it to hit the news. So they would send in a team, and sometimes I did it on my own because I didn't look like an operative. I didn't look like anybody threatening, and so I usually could get into a building or whatever a lot easier than a man who was armed or such could. I was used in disposing of bodies of people who were killed on ops. That's gross. I participated in some of those acted-out scenarios that developed into screen memories and other victims. So I was on both ends of that. I participated in quite a few porn movies, all kinds, the worst. And believe me, those are extremely lucrative, as well as selling of children is extremely lucrative. They had me do what they called pillow talk, which was having sex with dignitaries and other people that they wanted to get information on. I was actually kind of good at that. I'm not proud of it, but I was good at it. So
you would coerce them into
participate in occult rituals, which probably were filmed a lot of times to be used later on. And actually, some people are real into those kind of films, and again, that can be very money-making. Sometimes they use me to torture and interrogate people. As a child and adult, both, they would have me sexually service people. This is another area I want to touch on because a lot of survivors are feeling kind of uncomfortable talking about this. As an adult, they had parts of me that were programmed specifically to have sex with females, particularly female politicians and wives of politicians. Someday, the truth will be known about some of these females in D.C., but right now, obviously not. Another odd thing that one president had me do was do a seance for him, where he was like trying to get a certain person at that seance to believe that her dead husband was giving her instructions. So, I mean, you see, there's so many different ways that one person can be used, especially when they had cross-training in many different types of, different areas. People like me, they called multifaceted, which meant that even though I had one original personality, they split off the different parts of my personality to extremes, to where one part might lay down and be absolutely non-resistant when I was being raped. Another part would kill if somebody tried to do it, but those parts were amnesic to one another, and if they were controlled properly, they never came up at the same time. Very, very effective.
So who would you be doing these operations for?
Crud, you would ask. Okay, there were a number of groups that I did a lot of this stuff for. There was one group that I've recently been getting some verifications on. I knew them as the Octopus, and they actually did octopus programming on me, actually creating a part of me that really thought it was an octopus. And they did that by putting me in an aquarium with octopuses and putting a lid on to where I nearly drowned. Actually, I did kind of drown, and then they resuscitated me. They are really cute ways of doing some of this stuff. I have already remembered that Ollie North was involved, and I don't mind saying that because that's already pretty much information out there.
So involved with what in particular?
Iran-Contra.
So there were mind control elements to...
Yes. They had me go down to some countries in South America and several islands and discuss things with some leaders, bring them messages and such. So I found out that the name of the group that was running a lot of this stuff was actually called Octopus, and I about had a heart attack when I found out it was real. Oh, no, not them too. I was used extensively for the CIA. I was used also by the Pentagon, particularly with, sometimes there would be Ranger or Delta teams, and I'm not talking Delta programming, I'm talking the military personnel, where I would go in with them because of certain training I had that, and just being who I was and looking how I did, I could get into situations sometimes better than they could, and they would sometimes back me up. Like I said, I did some hits for the mob. I'm not at all proud of any of this. I also did some for them up in Chicago. I'm not sure which mob family that was for, and it was really awful stuff. I also did some stuff for a group that I knew as the Organization. I have received some confirmation that it is probably NSA, which would fit because when I started getting out, they were having me report to a building where they had some offices where I was being, my memories were being pretty much shut down and erased. So there's something going on with that as well. But CIA seemed to be the main one, as far as I've remembered.
Mm-hmm.
What they did also, and it's really bizarre how they do all this, they started working my schedule to where when I wasn't busy working on one of these ops, they would have me do like bodyguarding for politicians, which is a good favor for them, you know. Makes them feel beholden to somebody for my doing that service for them. But I also did other things for politicians, like bringing them drugs, children, stuff like that.
Did you get the sense that you were used more operationally, or did they involve you in any kind of experimentation as well?
There were some names that they used of what I assume were operations or projects. I know back when I was a teenager, they had a really odd code name that they used for some girls that I believe we were trained and programmed at Fort McClellan. I believe that's in Alabama. And they actually called us Golden Girls and Bluebird Models. And they actually introduced us to an audience full of people that were connected to this, and including relatives. It was like a big deal. It's like a lot of people were really proud of it that we were going to be used. And this was before we actually became operatives. Now, I know several women who, even when they were children, they were being used to do kills, okay? I personally don't have memory of that yet. Hopefully, well, I shouldn't say hopefully. If it happens, it happens. Now, my daughter was used to courier drugs even when she was a little girl. But for me, that was kind of the introduction as far as code names went. One that I heard a number of times was Operation Goldilocks, and I don't know if they were referring to how I was being used or if they were just using that word around me. I'm not sure. I'm just going to name some code words I heard. There was something called Operation Sea Base. I don't know if that's a capital C base or SEA base. Operation Massacre, that sounds real exciting. Operation Sea Stone or Sandstone, they used both that day. There was Royal India and Indian Ink. Now, I want to add here, I have tried to look up some of these words in a book I got a copy of called CIA Database. I believe it was by Ralph McGahey.
Mm-hmm.
I've found like 2 or 3 of these words in it, so I don't know if these are like operational names or if they were more specific code names that were being used at that time, kind of like cover names. There was a code name, Dark Purple or Deep Purple, that was a code name that had to do with literal reprogramming of MK victims, actual facilities and such. Let's see, there was Larkspur. There's a type of programming they did that used torture, extreme heat and extreme cold, that unfortunately I see a lot in commercials now, and it's called Fire and Ice. Pretty bad. There was Delta Blue. There was a Project Deep Blue, which seems to have been extremely important, and yet I do not have enough memory on that. There was, I did get a verification on this one, Gold Star Operational System. George Bush's baby, absolutely. He was so proud of it, and it's directly connected to NASA and DARPA, D-A-R-P-A both. There was one called Chronic Headache, another one called Marigold. Let's see, what else we got? This is another code name I kept running across, and it has something to do about intelligence computer systems analysis. And they actually would have me see it in my sleep just about. And it was like a big Z and then the letters BOM. I'm real curious about what that was. Another one that was recurring, I heard this a number of times, was simply Project 9. And I wish it wasn't that simple, because then it would be easier to find out what it was. There was a SAC location, Strategic Air Force Command, or Air Command, in the U.S. that had silos, and they codenamed that place Green Acres. Let's see what else we got. NSA's computer system, one of the code names for that was called simply the Brain. I think it was like the best computer system of all time in the U.S. Probably still is. Another project or operation name in my earlier adult years, and I'm 42 by the way, was Top Hat. They also had Messiah, Overlord. They had a code name simply called The Link that had to do with NSA or some type of possibly computer communications between NSA and NASA. They talked about a code name called the Centipede, which had to do with information compartmentalization between different departments in the CIA. They would say, let's see, one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. That way they kept people from knowing too much about what was going on. This one I ran across in my journalings, and it really surprised me. I was like, oh, my God. Okay, I'll tell the word last. Okay, and I even journaled, this is the name of CIA programming that had to do with a totally visualized, totally fantasy, internal mental world created in MK victims. The code name for this was Heaven's Gate. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Did that ever fit when I reread that? Okay. George Bush, and during the Reagan era, had mentioned Operation Sandstorm a number of times, and also a code name Mongoose to do with that, and it has something to do with Gaddafi. There was a computer system that I knew as code name Brandon that was connected to NASA. I'd like to learn more about that, actually. One code name that was mentioned to me a number of times was Clean Sweep. I did get some verification about that in the library, where they were trying to shut down a lot of the Aryan connections to all this, because a lot of these federal agencies realized that if they didn't do something, we were going to end up with a Nazi-run country. One of the things I would also, if I had a choice, ask for are open investigations into the Nazi influence in our government. I think this very seriously needs to be done, because one of the things my father really, and others, had talked about was that when the Nazi criminals were brought here from Germany through Operation Paperclip and all, they were very angry people. Mensa was an interesting code name that they used, and it is not directly connected to the organization that is used to be promoted a lot in Reader's Digest, by the way, which I was told to read and still do. Odd. I don't know what that command was for. Mensa was used as a code name for mind control victims who had genius IQs. One of the other things that I and some others were used to do were participate in D.C. in think tanks for several politicians, including George Bush. They weren't real creative sometimes with their speeches or ideas, and so they would, because we were around people at home and kind of knew what was going on, and politically in a lot of people's minds, they would have us come up with ideas to use in speeches. Project Armageddon is one that I was exposed to a lot. This had to do, and I don't know if this is made public yet, I don't want to hack anyone off, but it has to do with the Pentagon, and it has to do with global war, or World War Number 3. They did a lot of war games, and even on in rooms where they would practice it, whatever they do as military men. I had also inside what they called the Keys of Solomon, which was coded information that I carried for this Armageddon for these officers. I don't know if that was stored information for future or just for when they were planning. Yes, strategically planning. Two more Aryan-type code names that I heard a number of times were Pax Romana and The Plan. I have gotten a verification on the use of the words The Plan that is connected to Share International, which is rather fascinating to me, and I'm going to go ahead and throw a name out here. Henry Kissinger, who is a Luciferian, he is a staunch member of Lucius Trust, which was the way I was told to say it up in New York City, was one of the people that used those words a lot. There's a group that is strongly mob-connected called Satanic Hierarchy, and it was based in New York City, although one of the leaders who flew over to New York City a lot from Britain was Robert Maxwell, who supposedly suicided a couple years ago in the ocean off his boat. Seriously questioned that it was a suicide. My dad was also a member of Satanic Hierarchy. Mount Hood, I do not know what state that was in, but it was where they did traumatic baseline, also known as near-death torture and conditioning. Really awful stuff. Another code name that the CIA used was Ops Relief Corps. This is where specialized black op teams were sent out to other countries, usually by the CIA, when their in-place operatives were having some serious trouble and needed backup or straightening out or whatever. There's a company or organization that I've yet to find any verification on. Maybe they're that hidden. The initials for this company were AOR, or in Italy it was AORI. It's actually the people that were clients of this company were not told that it was actually standing for Austrian Order of the Reich, an absolute Nazi organization. It was run by a man, whether this is the SRI Stanford man or not. I knew this man as Paul Devereaux. He had two other aliases known as Paul Dubois and Paul Dupeche. One of their facilities was in France. It was on close to a shoreline, but I honestly don't know exactly where. He told me, whether this is true or not, that the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and the Ford Foundation were helping to fund this business. What they were doing there was bringing government leaders from different countries and people in high positions from different countries to their facilities, where they were taught to increase the theta brainwaves, basically, to do the same things that were already being taught, in the Pentagon, in the CIA, and several other stateside organizations. And at the same time, they were trying to recruit these leaders to be part of a New World government under their jurisdiction, which I assume was pretty Nazi-oriented. One thing I ran across a lot was called shell programming. This is something that was one of my dad's very twisted specialties. It was at a warehouse either at or near Georgia Tech University in Atlanta. Children were sent from different parts of the country there for Dad to program them. Well, actually split their personalities, and what he would do is have the kids get into these huge, I suppose they were papier-mâché white shells, upright, and then Dad or one of his assistants would pour large quantities of certain types of special-ordered bugs into the shells, and, of course, if you can only imagine what that'll do to a child's mind. He had a few problems where kids went into catatonic states. To him, that was a problem. To me, the entire thing was. There was another operation I ran across at least once where they discussed, and it was called Operation Blowfish. Now, I understand that it is possible that one or two of these names I picked up from some book I read, but the majority of them I absolutely did not, because they were recurring in my memories. They called me Plain Jane a lot when they would have me do bodyguarding for politicians. I did work side by side with Secret Service operatives. Well, I call them operatives sometimes. I think, again, they used me in these situations because I was not an employee. I was not easily identifiable that way. They especially would use this to work crowds, and because of the theta conditioning and abilities that they had honed in us, and a lot of Secret Service people have these abilities as well, they can actually pick up on hostile thoughts of a person in a crowd, like where the president is, and they can actually approach that person and disable them or take them out physically before they can even do anything. It is just wonderful how this works. Usually they would have me dressed in a plain brown jacket and skirt at that time. Another code name that they used extensively with me was Naomi, which I later learned was MK Naomi. It was where I was used to do biochemical assassinations, and it's pretty heartbreaking stuff, what I've remembered. There was one cult of young people that I had to put some kind of substance in lemonade in the refrigerator. I believe this was in another country, and I'm assuming they did not live. Sometimes they would have me put a pin, like a straight pin or a needle, sticking out of a corner of the bottom of my purse and have it laced with a substance that they had in a small jar of Vaseline, which I have stopped using completely, but it took a while. I would actually use Vaseline. I was so conditioned I would not use lipstick. I would use Vaseline on my lips. And what they would do is have me dip that pin in the substance in the Vaseline and then walk by the targeted individual and simply scratch them through their clothes. And I saw in a movie a couple of years later where somebody actually did this in the movie, and it was supposed to be about, covert operations. And I came very close to fainting when I saw that because I realized, oh my God, this is real. They had another code name that they used for people like me because I don't like the word basically, that's a George Bush code. What they did with me was, my family, okay, they pretty much gave me to the White House, and then I was exposed to other things from there in my childhood. I knew the White House as 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I have run across other MK ex-operatives who also knew it as that. A lot of times they would call it, D.C., they would call it either the Hub or they would call it Emerald City, and the president would be known to me as Oz, or God. They like to use either one of those a lot of times. So one of the things they conditioned me was to see myself as a homing pigeon, and that no matter where I go, I will go back to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, which I was made to believe was my home, and I had some extreme loyalties, and unfortunately still do, to the residents there even now. Need I say more? Chameleon is a code name that they used for MK operatives who were taught partly through dissociative lifelong adaptation. I mean, that's just a thing that you learn. Whatever situation you're in, if you have an amnesic barrier and you come to and you're in a strange situation, you learn real quick to adapt so that you don't get hurt. So I already had some of that conditioning just through a lot of what I experienced, but they specialized it even more and taught me how to dress and walk and talk and act like anyone that was around me, because that made it harder for others to notice me or identify me later on as sticking out and being, odd in the crowd or whatever.
What you've gone through is like just incredibly sophisticated uses of this.
And I have to say, and I've talked to other survivors about this, and they absolutely agree, these people are incredibly intelligent. I know some of them will like hearing that, and it's true. I wish they would use their intelligence for healing instead of for hurting. That's all. Another code word that they used for me, and I noticed, I believe it was Kathy O'Brien or Bryce Taylor who also was called this, is fail-safe. And what that was supposed to mean, although it didn't work real well, was obviously, I think it's wonderful, was that the programming they put in us and therefore the memories that we had of certain individuals and stuff could never, ever come out or be accessed. Obviously, it didn't work. Now, I'm going to touch on one little thing that I have gotten some verifications on, but they get me in the most trouble, and I don't want to keep any secrets tonight because that'll make it even more hazardous for me later on. For at least a decade, the CIA and KGB have been working together in a lot of operations, and most of the training for these most of the cross training was done in a place called Minsk, Russia. If I hear a person talking Russian, I automatically space out. And I'm supposed to have a part that speaks in Russian, although I am not about to let that happen. I think it would terrify me. But one of the code names that they would use or hand me a candy bar was dark chocolate. And I later found out that chocolate is a way of blocking memory as well. But some of the code names for alder states that they used there was Sasha, Mink, Ermine, Sable, and Luna, or La Luna was another one. So they had some real simple number codes that they also used with that. 3, 2, and 1, positive 3, 2, and 1 had to do with CIA activities. Then 0 would mean, now see, I could see this on an envelope sent to me, and I would know what it meant by code without even having to think. It would automatically kick something in my head. 0 meant that I was at home doing my regular job, regular activities. In other words, I was not active. Negative 1, 2, and 3 had to do with KGB activities. Now, what's odd about that was it's like they work behind each other's backs a lot, too. So, I guess it's just one of those deals. They were stabbing each other in the backs while they were working with each other as well. Oh, gosh. That's the main ones.
So
That's the main stuff.
these code names are either operations or experimental projects or projects
Right.
or
Right.
actual types of programming done on you.
Like I said, the main one's Alpha, Beta, Delta, Theta, Omicron. Naomi was a specialized program that they put in me specifically to do the biochem ops, which, by the way, came out of mostly... There was a place underground at a military facility that I knew as the bird cage. It's where they kept a lot of these chemicals. I have remembered as Naomi, and I actually called myself Naomi at those times. I would report to a place called Redstone Arsenal, which was in Alabama, not far at all from where I lived in Atlanta. The way that information came up, I was going to a seminary, and I believe it was in '92, near Atlanta, Baptist Seminary, and one pastor who was taking a class there with us started talking about Ruth and Naomi to me, and how I should, from the Old Testament, and how the past is gone, I shouldn't think about it anymore. I don't know if he did that deliberately or unintentionally, but when he used the word Naomi, I had to literally leave the room and go in the bathroom, and I spent the next half hour hysterically crying. I had no idea why, and unfortunately, in the way the heating system was set up, I didn't know they heard the entire thing. I quit school shortly after that. But after I had that serious crying, Jack, that's when the memories came up. And then when I was presented by Mark Phillips the CIA database, then I found the code name MK Naomi in there, and it verified directly what I had been remembering. Awful stuff.
Incredible. So. What's your sense of how many years you were doing operations for the government?
Doing operations? Well, okay, for the government, and I have to say for people too, because sometimes it was people who were in high positions in the government, and it's kind of hard to separate it out. I would say, give me a second here, 20 years. 20 years.
And at what age do you feel that the conditioning had started with your father?
Oh, man. It started like when I was about 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
And there was special facilities that they took me to where other children were taken to. There's one place that I've had numerous memories of, and they always had me think they called it the school, but the employees would call it the fortress between themselves, and it was a red brick, school size, like elementary school size building. I believe it was one story, and right below the roof it had a wide horizontal band of mustard-colored paint. It looked really odd, and that's why that stuck out for me. But in that building, they did some surgery on my head. I don't understand it all. I'm assuming it did something to my brain because I had a real problem thinking and moving, well, for a while after that. And they had the children split up into groups there. They had one room that they called Romper Room where they did some odd Mr. Doobie programming, I guess because we were watching that at that time. But they had like Unit A, B, A. In each unit, children were alternated into op-type conditioning and training. We were even taught we couldn't even leave, and our parents couldn't even come get us until the teddy bears they gave each of us, we disemboweled and cut the heads off. So even that far back, we were getting trained. I've been to a number of other facilities as a child and as a young adolescent where other things... Oh, yeah, I need to mention this. One person I would like to get more information about, just for my own verification, is a man who, he was rather slim, erect, probably, 6 feet, possibly a little shorter, and I knew him by his Americanized name and his German name. Americanized, he was known as Dr. Black. German, he was known as Dr. Schwartz. He was a major figure in my childhood. I have remembered that he also had out my mother, who is definitely a multiple, and I am not having communication with her at all. He had kind of curly black hair, dark eyes. He spoke fluent German, and my dad seemed to be pretty close to him. Dr. Schwartz seemed to be very much into the Aryan belief systems as well. One of the things that I remembered about him was there was an actual black train car that was his office. I don't know if he traveled in that or what, or if it was used to, make us feel crazy when we met him there, but he actually set it up inside as an office. And what he seemed to be most interested in was my aggression. Now, I've heard of Dr. Green, and I don't yet have any memory of anyone like him, but Dr. Schwartz I have big-time memories about. And I am assuming at this point that he was more interested in children that were going to be used in black operations when they were adults. There was one young blonde boy who was taken by his blonde-haired mother to see him, I think it was, right before me one time, I believe it was, and that boy was extremely homicidal and setting fires and such, and he spent a lot of time alone with Dr. Schwartz, one-on-one as well in that train. There was a mental hospital very close by. I would say probably, from the track, I would say it was probably no more than half a mile. And from what I understood, he also worked over there quite a bit, but I guess they didn't want us to remember the hospital, and I think that's why he used that railroad car.
What are the kinds of facilities were used to train children and adults for mind control? Were these government or military facilities?
One of the things they did with me, and I don't know if they did it with other children, there was a large building in Reading, Pennsylvania, or very, very close by, but I believe it was in the city. It was a multi-story building, and they had several rooms with large stages in it. And when my dad, I was only 8 years old, my dad would, he created a Dick Tracy part in me. Oh, good grief. He would have me take all my rage out on him and other people who would dress up in black robes as they did in the rituals when I was raped and everything else. He would have some men, I don't know if they were actual street bums or if they were dressed up as street bums, but he would tell me that they were bad men, and it's like all the rage at these people who deliberately dressed in the robes to trigger the rage, I would take it out on those men, and these people that were setting this whole thing up, they would actually guard the doorways so that these men could not leave, and sometimes I was given a gun, sometimes I was given a knife. Now, I still don't want to believe I actually killed these men at my age. That is hard for me to comprehend.
How old would you have been at the time?
It might have been fake blood, but there was definitely some kind of blood. When I was a younger teenager, we lived in Maryland for a year. I lived in Cockeysville, Maryland, and I went to Cockeysville, I think it was junior high, I believe it was junior high. What we would do is a number of us would be transported from the school. Like, we would be taken to the school, but then we would be transported from it in a bus and taken to one of two facilities where we got a lot of classroom training. One of those facilities was a bunch of trailers and pavilion-type buildings where people would actually sit down and teach us a lot of different things, including more chameleon training and such. They taught us diplomacy, how to act around dignitaries and such. Just real practical information on how to stay alive during ops, like not getting involved emotionally with people, and a lot of other things. A lot of it's still blocked out because I just don't want to remember, to be honest. The other place that they would sometimes take us to was I guess it was an abandoned shopping center, because it was, at one time, obviously a shopping center. 2-story, they had like a rail and a walkway all the way around upstairs with rooms that they had made in the classrooms, and we were taught things there too. And one of the things they would work on is our behaviors. They would lecture us and just give us hell sometimes if we were acting out in inappropriate ways at home. So they knew that a lot of us kids were going to be trouble if they didn't, teach us how to conduct ourselves in social life. So that was a real interesting year there.
You've mentioned a number of times about the Nazi connections particularly with your family and the doctors that you were exposed to. Do you have a sense that the mind control technology came from the experiments done by Nazis, or was there any connection there?
I've talked with several investigators to try and understand this. From what I understand, the OSS and the military were both aware that they needed to get more informed about how to use such technology because other countries were beginning to experiment with it. And I think what kicked in during Operation Paperclip, and I think the other one was National Security or something like that, was when they found out that I think that Dachau was a big place where a lot of this stuff was being done, and so were several other concentration camps. where they were doing actual psychological experiments on a lot of the prisoners. What they seemed to do was want to get some of these scientists who had been doing these specific experiments and finding out what they were able to accomplish, bringing them over to the States, cleaning up their records, and then having them work for our government and teach people in our government how to do this. From what I understand, that's where Dr. Green also got some of his training. What's kind of interesting about that is that Dr. Green had been working at Edgewood, from what I've read. An experiment was done on me at Edgewood, too, involving a chimpanzee named Sonny, which was further assassin programming there. Now, what I ran across a lot were Aryan groups that also knew how to use this kind of programming and would actually handle some of us at home. In other words, sometimes, like I was in a neighborhood where a number of these people lived in Atlanta, and they would call me at home, trigger me, or tell me to watch a certain TV show that would trigger me. One neighbor gave me some bizarre things that he supposedly made in his workshop that were serious triggers. I obviously trashed them after I took pictures of them. So there seems to be a definite Nazi connection here. NASA seemed to have been crawling with this stuff for quite a while, and when I read Linda Hunt's book, Secret Agenda, it was a big-time education for me on why, because a lot of these Nazi war criminals ended up being put in NASA, and they set up NASA. They literally set it up, including Werner von Braun. From what I understand in Linda's book, his record was also cleaned up considerably, and still some of his former associates get real hacked when anyone mentions that he was a criminal. At the NASA facilities, they had some incredibly unusual programming that they did to some of us. I had one experience. I was probably 15, I don't know, somewhere in there. I was taken to Goddard, which was a NASA facility outside of D.C. One of the things they seem to like to do is dress like they're in Star Trek. That's an obvious scramble, They would actually wear Star Trek uniforms with the Enterprise logo or embroidered whatever on the uniforms. And sometimes they would actually hypnotize me to think it. Now, remember, this was the old Star Trek, okay? Like it was Dr. Spock, Bones, Captain Kirk, and such. And that, so I could not remember what their faces really looked like. One of the things they did at Goddard was very, very professional, very ingenious. They hooked me up to some kind of a computer system, very high-tech for that period of time, where they had, like, earphones. Actually, it was more like a helmet on my head. I don't understand how all this worked, but it's like I closed my eyes and I could actually see images flashing in front of my face. And then they had a lot of sound effects, and they did what they called Father Time training at that facility at that time. Later on, I've been to Huntsville, I've been to Houston, I've been to Cape Canaveral, and Titusville, I think, was also a NASA facility. They did some nasty torture there. One of the things that they seemed to specialize in, these NASA people, was time folding and going back in time, at least in our minds. And also, I don't know, it's just really experimental, pretty weird stuff. One of the things that they used especially on a lot of us was to make us read Madeleine L'Engle's L'Engle books. There was a trilogy. The first one was Wrinkle in Time, and it was about these children that were going from one dimension to another with these three older women, or whatever they were supposed to be, like angels or whatever, looking for their father. And they used a word in those books called tesseract, which was a folding between dimensions where you could travel from one dimension to another, or I don't think it was so much about time there as it was between dimensions. And they were very serious about this. They deal a lot with physics, not nuclear physics, there's another word for that, where they really are trying to find ways to explore other dimensions and such. And I don't know if they were using us to see if we could do it. I don't know what the deal was, but it seriously messed up my head. And it was really nice to get verifications from other survivors that, yes, they really did try to do this with some of them.
But how did NASA use mind control or mind control slaves?
Well, they to be more into programming. It seemed to be more their forte, and I don't know that they were so much into using slaves for their own means. I was absolutely terrified the entire time I was at the facility because I recognized a lot of the buildings. I was sure that somebody was going to recognize me and do something to me, and I have no memory that anything bad happened, but I noticed, like, a lot of survivors, now, with people like me, they did not use mole markings because people, in other governments would have been able to catch that if we were caught, okay? But a lot of the beta slaves in particular, they called them beta slaves, had mole markings to show, like, what level, like presidential or another level. One thing I noticed at Huntsville, the actual city, was people were so tranced out there, a lot of them, and they had moles all over the place. And I was like, oh, my God, what is going on here? I've been very negative also about the space camps because I'm sorry. If they have no compunction about doing this for the CIA and whoever else to victims, what's to keep them from doing things to kids while they're there at space camp, okay? I noticed in one of the gift shops they had books on Klingon language. And, I mean, it's cute in a way, but I thought, wouldn't this be a wonderful way to use a program language that no one else would understand but a handler and a slave, So that there was a lot of things that I looked at there and I was going, oh, this is bad. But my personal experience was more that they were programming me so that when others, including especially one president in particular, George Bush, he knew Father Time programming very well. And he tried to use it on me. The only problem was he didn't use it right, and it didn't work. I love it when they messed up, because then I remembered better. But like I said, they were more into high-tech equipment. They later on used a lot of virtual reality equipment as well. Another thing that I need to mention, too, that was used a lot were driving simulators. A lot of times, for screen memories in particular, they would put me in a room with a car that was like on a hydraulic lift, or several hydraulic lifts, to where it could move from side to side or feel like it was bumping or something, and they would like run a movie in front of me and have me in a hypnotic state or drugged to where the movie became real, and I really thought the car was driving somewhere. Now, another thing that I have run across, and I have been able to verify for another survivor in Dallas at a hospital there, was that they also have a place near Dallas where they have an actual full-size UFO in a very large room that also has that same type of hydraulic system beneath it, and the survivor would be, a victim, would be taken into the UFO. They would see people that looked like aliens. Certain things would be done to them, and they would think that they had just been abducted by aliens in a UFO. So that's another thing. It's such a con job they're doing on some of these victims.
Was part of the NASA programming or any of the perpetrators you were involved with, did all the programming be accompanied with trauma, torture, and abuse?
The smarter ones didn't use torture. Now, this is going to be kind of gross. I'll try and keep this real generic. One of the things a lot of these men did, especially when they were giving me specific orders for an op, like briefing me, they would make me get down on the floor and do oral sex on them, okay? That in itself was a definite trauma for a number of reasons, okay? If nothing else, it was extremely degrading. But there were some people that were so good at hypnosis and or making me feel like I was safer with them. Now, I'm going to say this, and I know this sounds sick, okay, and I'm aware of this, and this is what I consider a Stockholm Syndrome effect. I still love Henry Kissinger, even though I should be absolutely furious at some of the things he did to me. I haven't found that anger yet, because he did not rape me like a lot of the others also did. And he was nice to me a lot of times, okay? That was very, very, very confusing for me. It was a lot easier when I had a handler or what they called owners. Some of these people actually thought they owned me. Robert Maxwell was one, by the way. Oh, what a guy. Anyway, Henry Kissinger. He was just very good at confiding in me about certain things. He was a very, very lonely man, definitely a lonely man. He was an absolute genius, and I think because of the things he was involved in, and because he actually is one of the few perpetrators I know who was loyal to his belief systems and did not apologize for it. That even made me like him more, because at least he was honest about being a bastard. Okay?
And what was his belief systems?
So people like him, I had a really difficult time with him. By the way, he is very, very into, I won't say into Aryan stuff as he is into Luciferian belief systems, very much so.
So what does the Luciferian belief system involve?
Well, he gave me quite an introduction to that personally. By the way, Lucius Trust, the organization that he is a leader of, from what I understand, started out as Lucifer Publishing back in like the 1920s. Tex Mars has a book on cults and religion that explains this. One of the books of Tex Mars I really do like. One of the few. Okay, enough said on that. Luciferians, what they basically believe is that Jesus Christ was a fake. They believe that Lucifer, they don't like using the word Satan. They believe in Lucifer, son of the morning, day star. They worship the sun to worship him. Okay, they see him as the sun. Some of them have a serious vendetta, probably for childhood reasons, against Christians and Jews both. I found out not too long ago that Henry Kissinger had allegedly, but several people have told me this, so I think it probably is true, that he had been a chauffeur for a Nazi officer during World War II. He was raised as a Hasidic Jew, so I can only begin to shudder when I think of what might have been done to his own mind. And then he was used to bring some of the officers over to the U.S. and help them set up there. So I think some serious stuff was done to him. He seemed to be in a lot of pain inside somewhere, and I think that's why he seemed to be pretty lonely. But he seemed to have a serious vendetta against Christians and Jews for whatever personal reasons. Some of these people who are Luciferians have a very, very strong determination to create a global government that pretty much promotes the Luciferian religion. I don't like to think about what they're going to have to do that if they decide to follow through. He did tell me that this Lord Maitreya dude would be their main public figure in doing this. He also told me that they were going to use Billy Graham and Robert Schuller in particular to help transition a lot of the Christian community over to accepting some of this belief system. Now, Robert Schuller is he's pastor of the Crystal Cathedral. Billy Graham and Norman Vincent Peale, according to a book biography on him called Goliath, started his ministry and mentored him all the way through, and then Armand Hammer became his mentor also. Now, Norman Vincent Peale is 33rd degree Mason, and I'm like, what? Crystal Cathedral itself, from what several high-level officials told me, is actually a temple to Ra, the sun god, which a lot of these Luciferians worship, another name for Lucifer. Now, there's also the Golden Dawn, which is, a lot of these people are in both groups, okay? Lucius Trust and Golden Dawn. Golden Dawn is what I consider to be a neo-pagan underground religious organization that has a lot of members in D.C. They do a lot of pagan rituals, seem to have a lot of Masonic connections with this also. They also are into the sun, big time. So what I'm seeing and what I suspect is happening is that these people are really desperately, so that they can come out of the closet, and I, in a sad way, understand that there's a lot of lesbianism in the Golden Dawn. There is a lot of ritually and sexually abusing children in the Golden Dawn. There are a lot of pedophiles that are politicians in D.C., and there are a lot of people who are being blackmailed by politicians who are pedophiles to do sex with children, sometimes in drug states, sometimes in coerced states, so that they also will be blackmailed and cover up for these people if they are investigated. This Golden Dawn is a very large organization, and it's amazing as I track the people I've remembered that are involved in this organization and how they always go to a lot of the same functions. And when one is being called up on whatever publicly things that he should not have done or she should not have done, the others always tend to cover for them publicly and make them look real good. So it's really fascinating how these people kind of take care of each other.
Now,
I don't think that's going to change. From what I understand, a lot of these neo-pagan, or actually I consider to be generational pagan belief systems, they came from other countries. My father's dad was Welsh and was a Druid. And a lot of these people are not willing to let go of their old religions. So it's like they'll go to church on Sunday and they'll practice these other religions at other times.
and these groups that seem to be interested in global domination, what is your sense of that, their ties or their connections to what is known as the New World Order?
Direct. A lot of these people that are involved in what is considered immoral and highly immoral and or flat out illegal activities, they want to be able to do it publicly. A lot of these people do not like feeling ashamed, and that you would believe how strong a drive that is. I do feel sad about a lot of them because it's like they're stuck in a system that they really need recovery for, you know. They would like to see a world government that they run, of course, to where the laws are changed, to where there are no more laws particularly against adult child sex, to where bestiality is all right because there's a lot of bestiality in these rituals too, to where, you know, they would like to pretty much get rid of the Christian legal code. And it does seem to be going in that direction one step at a time. I've been really amazed since I've remembered all this as I track how they're gradually wiping. And I'm not saying Christianity should be the only way people believe, but there are some good morals that do help keep a lot of people in line, okay? It's like, if the morals are gone, what's left? Social anarchy, basically. So that is pretty scary. Now, some of these people also consider themselves to be elite. A lot of them do have Aryan generational backgrounds. They consider themselves to be socially, mentally, every way above what they call cattle, sheep, lower classes. A lot of them have some very strong prejudices, although publicly they'll act like they don't, towards people of other colors and other nationalities. A lot of them seem to want to have an Aryan New World government where the Aryans are the ones in charge. And I have heard some of them talk, and quite seriously, unfortunately, about how they'd eventually like to phase out all the other races until it's pure Aryan. I hope to God that people don't let them do that. Because what's going to happen to people like me, if they're able to do this, we're back into slavery again with a vengeance, okay? Yeah. Because they will not take it lightly that we are talking. And right now, I tell people, and I try not to be morbid about this, but as I see them step by step doing what they said they were going to do in a lot of their planning meetings, it's terrifying for me, absolutely terrifying. And most of all, that people do not seem to care enough to do anything about it. That's the most terrifying thing of all.
And what do you know of what they are planning to do in terms of implementing their global domination schemes?
Well, one of the things that they were planning on doing was having UFO invasions. I've noticed it looks like, I don't know if they're going to pull that one off or not. It may be that one of the things they were planning on doing was to get people so afraid of a race from another planet or whatever coming and having authority here and terrorizing us that we would just fall apart and go, please, don't hurt us. We'll do whatever you say, okay? These people that are pushing that scam, and Henry Kissinger again is one, In fact, I've got some documentation where he actually said one time at a global conference that what we need is a UFO invasion. That was hysterical when I read that in a not totally funny way. The other thing that they were trying to work is to get a lot of pastors to push that to Christian communities and congregations that we are in the quote-unquote last days or the beginning of tribulation in the book of Revelations. They talked, now I don't know if this is true or not, all I can say is what they said, that AIDS was a deliberately created epidemic because it fit one of the plagues in the book of Revelations, and what they've been trying to do is go step by step, using the book of Revelations as a blueprint to convince people that we're in the last days. Okay, it seems to be working rather well so far, unfortunately. Again, this is psychological. I consider it psy-war, which Michael Aquino used to be pretty involved in. Excuse me, yeah, that is Aquino. They used to make me call him Aquino, so that would also discredit me. They seem to be just messing with people's heads a lot right now. All these movies about disasters, that really does a number on people, too. They were planning on doing what they called takeover, which was implementation of a new world government by the year 2000, but I really don't see how they're going to do it. Now, they did talk also about having a president assassinated so that FEMA could take over and they could just have, just total shutdown in the U.S. Of a lot of the basic services. Yeah. If that happens, I may as well kiss my butt goodbye, excuse me. Because I don't expect I'll be at my house much longer at that point, willingly, okay? Again, the way I look at it, it's almost like if somebody were told they have so long to live. It makes every day so precious to me now. And wouldn't it be a wonderful thing for me to find out that they don't get away with it, that it doesn't happen, and that I can have a long life of freedom? I would be so excited. But I'm also trying to be practical about this, And when I see what they're doing, oh my gosh, the things they're doing, and in front of everybody's faces, through legislation and all, I'm not so sure they're not going to do it all.
So they being the people that are involved in these organizations that are bringing this about, right. And it's your sense that these people are well placed within society and... Oh yeah. Now I will add this. I know there's been a lot of talk back and forth about the Bilderbergers. They are, as far as I know, the top people heading this up, the absolute top of the top. And I was not real surprised at all to see Sam Nunn go to the meeting last time. I don't know if he went to Lake Lanier, and that Henry Kissinger usually goes. Yes. Mm-hmm. So that's the main group that is masterminding this. And again, I got to give them credit where credit's due. They are smart people, but very sick at the same time. Certainly, putting their mental abilities to the wrong purposes in terms of the public good.
Yeah. Well, the one thing, it's amazing. I've done research just to understand. Again, like I said, I'll probably end up being a psychological analyst or something someday because I'm so into this now. As I've learned about a lot of these people's childhoods, I've begun to understand that it seems like a lot of their rage that they're using to pretty much force that government into existence, maybe towards some of their own parents, authority figures, It's really sad to see that because I think a lot of them need rehabilitation themselves, and I'm not joking on this. Yeah. But it's like, my dad with his underground black marketing associates, it's like a cult, and it really is because if you know secrets and the other people know secrets, then you're all involved in the same things, and they can blackmail you if you tell, or worse yet, kill you. A lot of these people, because they're high profile, they will never be able to talk about this stuff without dying, and they know it, or losing their loved ones if they are able to love at all. What happens is after a while it wears you down, and you get to where your loyalty ends up being to these other people that are part of these same efforts, and associating mainly with each other. And that is, in a way, cult mentality on the top level, even. it's amazing to see that. Absolutely amazing to me.
Do you have a sense that people are working within government and military to put a wrench in their plans?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of people who are trying in very careful ways to get some of this exposed to help some survivors get free. It did happen to me, but I can't go into the details of it. I'm still trying to get more understanding about it myself. There are some pretty neat people out there. Very, very neat people. And some of them are literally risking their lives because they see what's happening. They want to live in a land or a country where there are basic freedoms that are respected. I personally, no, I can't talk about this. Okay, let's just say that I've got one of these little books that shows the Bill of Rights and stuff, and it means a lot to me because when I found out that literally I was a slave, I mean, that Article 13 of the Bill of Rights, it was in direct violation of that, okay? So it's helping me to realize that, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights are very important things that are not taught about much at all in school anymore. It's sad.
What is your sense of how mind control and mind control slavery was used in these organizations that want to bring about the New World Order?
Oh, okay. Now we're talking mass mind control pretty much. Okay, one thing. There are a lot of actors and actresses in Hollywood who are MK victims. Absolutely. I met quite a few now. I tend to see them promoting the same worldviews as these high-level conspirators do. And believe me, conspiracy is a natural, ongoing part of history. People that say that, call people conspiracy theorists, I'm sorry. To me, it's conspiracy realism. It seems like a lot of them, because the Hollywood folks, because a lot of people look up to them as role models, they tend to have a lot of influence on people, even some of the TV programs and stuff that are pushed. It's really rather frightening. The people that were planning a lot of this were not so concerned about the older people. They talked a lot about targeting the youth, through schools. Captain Planet, Ted Turner's Captain Planet cartoon to me is, some people say that it's a good thing because it helps kids to clean up the environment, but it also heavily, heavily pushes a new world way of thinking. And he's flat out, he's another one of the few honest people out there. He admits that is part of his personal agenda. So I'm seeing a lot of signs here that seems to be leading into it step by step. It's amazing. I
wonder if we can just go back to something you mentioned about the whole alien part in terms of mind control and a New World Order implementation plan. How do you think this is tied to the phenomena of the growth of allegations of being abducted by aliens by the public?
Directly. Directly.
Do you feel that people are being experimented on by the government instead of
yes, absolutely,
instead of aliens?
Now I realize that there are some MK survivors who will strongly disagree with me, and I'm not trying to get into an argument with any of them. Okay, I just am going by what I've experienced and remembered, and by what some others have experienced and remembered. A lot of us were hypnotized and otherwise tricked into believing that we had been abducted by aliens when actually it was government-connected handlers that were using us for illegal activities. One thing I did run across, and I don't want to get too much into this, but okay, one of the things that the Nazis were working on very hard, and I know there's documentation out there on this somewhere, although I understand also that a lot of this the government did try to suppress, our government did, was that they were doing a lot of genetic experimentation also on some of their prisoners in the concentration camps. And also they were big time into breeding their own. My dad used to brag, and when he bragged, I knew it was a sure thing. He had a real problem with talking too much, and yeah, he got in trouble a number of times for that. But he talked about how they were doing genetic experiments on embryos that were creating what they called children. These children are, I personally believe, aliens that are literal ones that people have seen. The ones, I met several at a NASA facility. One was an older child, I guess I would call it. He was able to speak 2 languages. He was able to speak English. He was also able to speak what they called a trilateral language. He used a lot of buzzes and clicks and symbolic hand signals and such. He also had a lot of theta abilities, to where it was amazing. Man, he was good at it. He had been programmed, as I understand some of the others had, that were genetically experimented on, to believe that they are aliens. But he seemed to understand that it was not real, that he was human. And my concern about this, most of all, I'm more concerned about them than anyone else, that if that information is ever made available to where people take it seriously, they will be killed and their remains put away where no one will ever find it. Because if it's true, it is one of the biggest crimes that an agency of our country has ever perpetrated against other humans. Now, what I understand is that, like with all the UFO movies lately, oh my gosh, and so many TV shows about it. It's been unreal how many there have been in the last 2 years. Now Jodie Foster has that one coming out. I think it already has. It's preparing people's minds to believe that these aliens are real, that they really do exist, that they really are trying to contact us or us them. I can't help but wonder if some of these human, quote-unquote, aliens won't be used down the road as some kind of proof to groups of people.
So these people have been, you believe, genetically altered through genetic engineering to look like aliens, or what the public has been conditioned to view as an alien?
I've had several breeders of these people. One of the things that I noticed with some of these breeders, one woman, her husband worked for NASA. She was in a hospital in Dallas. She was made to believe that she had 2 hearts in her body. It was really confusing the heck out of her psychiatrist. And there were some things that she said even before I knew her husband worked for NASA, because she wasn't telling anyone anything about that. There were some things that she said, and I looked at her one day and I said, are you a breeder? And she looked at me and went, yeah. And I said, do you have NASA connections? And she looked at me and just shocked, my husband works for NASA. And I was like, I was thinking, oops, you're in danger, I went to her psychiatrist and explained the situation, because she had a lot of the physical, especially facial characteristics of these quote-unquote aliens. There was another woman I met, it was like back in '88, in a reprogramming facility, who also was a breeder, and she had a problem because she would see UFOs coming at her where there were none in rooms, okay? And she had one thing that some of these breeders, I don't know if they have them now, but they used to, they had what was called a bird nest haircut, where it was shaved part of the way around, and then the rest looked like what they called a bird nest. That was one of the ways you used to be able to identify some of them. So these seem to be generational experiments genetically, and specifically done for that purpose. So, take it or leave it. I tell everyone, one of these days, if it's true, and I believe it is, the whole world's going to know it. But it may be a long time.
Do you have any indication of U.S. government or German government's use of UFO technology that they have developed craft?
I was exposed to some of that. I saw at least one UFO for sure. Again, but they had, it wasn't a garage, but it was a large room that there was like a door where that thing could go out into the open, and it wasn't touching the ground. It was an amazing thing. It had a fantastic looking metal to it. It was just, absolutely fascinated by it. I have been told by some of these leaders that they started out by using these craft, which they said were created by the German, some of the German scientists and whatever these people were in Nazi Germany, and that this, they'll talk about the V2 rockets, was it?
Mm-hmm.
They'll talk about that on Discovery Channel and other stuff, but they never ever bring up this end of it, of what they had as far as technology and brought it over with them.
Yeah,
I think NASA probably is the biggest cover for this stuff. I understand that there is a base in the Himalayas as well. I also understand that there are some facilities under oceans where some of this stuff is also stored way, way out of detection areas. They do seem to be able to go down in deep, deep areas of water, include one place near Hawaii. What they supposedly started out with, from what I've been told by a number of people, was using magnetic grids, they called it. I don't understand that kind of technology, but I kind of understood what they were saying. They used, I don't know, there's something around the Earth that started out using magnetic forces.
Right. Well, the Earth itself has a large electromagnetic grid field around it, and it's my understanding that they've used that kind of energy somehow in conjunction with creating these craft.
Okay. That you say it better than I could. All I know is they talked about it, and again, Dad bragged about that too, like it was a big deal. But I've also heard that nowadays they don't use that particular technology anymore, that they use other stuff now. But I don't know, I've not been exposed to that end of it.
Now, you mentioned that it's your belief that a number of Hollywood personalities are under the influence of mind control and that are being used. Can you give some examples of some of the belief systems that they're pushing, that they're being forced to?
We are basically that the biggest one I've seen is that we should put the Earth and Mother Nature, whatever, and that we should put animals as higher in importance than our own selves. To me, that is an absolutely devastating thing to be teaching children, because it totally brings down their sense of self-esteem and of self-worth and of defending their own belief systems and the right to think for themselves. This is very, very strong right now, these two particular belief systems that are being pushed. Those are the ones I'm most worried about, because if kids are being taught that an animal's life is more valuable than their own.
Well, certainly all life is precious, including animal life, but
right.
What you're saying that it's more, that this information is more being used to, it's almost like change the kind of mass psychology of the public.
Exactly.
And into playing into this implementation of a new world order.
Right, because what it's going to boil down to, if they are able to continue, is that personal loyalties and personal freedoms must be given up for Mother Earth. That's what they're pushing most. One of the other goddesses that a lot of people worship in the Golden Dawn is Gaia, or Gaia, whichever way you want to call it. I always called it Gaia. And they talked about this in the planning meetings, that they're going to be pushing this more and more, Gaia or Gaia worship, literal worship. And Mother Earth is a very, very, very strong psychological force and symbol, because a lot of these, this is another thing they talked a lot about, and that's by getting parents, making things more difficult financially for young families in particular, to where the husband might have to work 2 jobs, the woman has to work, the kids end up in daycare. What it does is make the kids less able to identify with their parents and look more for role models and nurturing outside of their own homes. One of the things that some of these conspirators were hoping to accomplish by that is Gaia or Gaia worship, by having these kids feel a need for a larger-than-life goddess or force or identity that would be a nurturing substance or force to them. The reason I've learned that they also are into the sun so much is because I have learned from therapists that feeling the warmth of the sun, like laying out and stuff in it, is the closest form of physical and emotional nurturing to maternal nurturing. I was really fascinated when I heard that one. So there is some psychological stuff going on here that's quite powerful. And, you know, and I try to stay emotionally detached from a lot of this so that I can look at it and learn about what's going on now and see where it's heading without freaking out. Because that does me no good. It does no one else any good, you know. And they're slick. These people are really slick.
Now, do you have knowledge of other parts of the entertainment industry being involved in mind control?
Mm-hmm. Oh, how?
Yeah, and what other parts of the entertainment industry?
Oh, music's a big one. I haven't even touched on that. I was extensively programmed through lyrics and even certain chords. I wish I knew the words for all this. Even sequence of certain notes, even major chords to minor chords, certain ones, but especially lyrics. Music is a very, very, very powerful way to control a person emotionally in particular. In mind control, MK type mind control, governmental, a lot of survivors, in fact, I've corresponded or talked to, the survivors I've corresponded or talked to, not a single one has not been programmed using music lyrics as well. A lot of times, I still have a bad habit of not catching myself trancing out in time when a certain song will come on that is very, just very triggering for me. The Beatles' music was used extensively, more than any other music I know of. Pink Floyd was used a lot too. And this is funny because people from my generation, MK generation, our base movie programming was Wizard of Oz. The next generation was Alice in Wonderland. They use Disney movies a lot, by the way. Whether deliberate Disney is aware of it or not, I don't even want to guess. I don't want to get into that. But it wasn't too long ago that someone found out what I have no doubt, absolutely no doubt, was an actual program where a Pink Floyd song could be played along with the Wizard of Oz movie, and everything fit step by step by step throughout the movie.
Right.
Pink Floyd music was used a lot in NASA programming because, again, it affects a person's sense of time. All the songs that they had about time. It makes you feel like you're tripping in the first place to listen to most of their music. The Who, especially their opera Tommy, was used a lot on me too. And there are many others. It would take me a day to tell you all the different songs and lyrics and such.
Do you feel that these musicians or producers of this music were somehow knowledgeable of what was going on?
Okay, you start with the lyricist, okay? I mean, if they're coming up with this stuff themselves, they have to know something, okay?
But is it possible that the programmers could have just used
yes,
songs?
That's absolutely possible too. I mean, you look at it. A lot of times, MK victims will, especially if they're artistically creative, whether it's music, writing, art, whatever. Their programming will bleed through. That's not good words. It will come through subconsciously sometimes in all of this. So it is possible some victims are programmed and the programming comes out in the music. Now, I have heard from several sources that Elton John is an MK victim, and that may be why some of his lyrics are so loaded with this stuff. I don't know. We'll see.
Do you feel Pink Floyd were somehow knowledgeable of these mind control techniques as well? They were cognizant of what they were doing?
I don't know because I never met them.
Uh-huh.
I really don't know on that. I just know that it worked really well.
That seems to be quite an coincidence with that soundtrack and the Wizard of Oz Wizard of Oz film.
To me, that was absolutely no coincidence whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so right down the line all the way through. And Wizard of Oz is a long movie, okay? And for this to be a coincidence, I'd like for someone to figure the odds on that one. Probably 1,000,000 to 1. Okay.
I'd like to ask you about this film that has just been released entitled Conspiracy Theory, which is about a mind control slave.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
What was your response to the film? I understand that you have seen it.
Yo. I had a total meltdown after I came home from that movie. I was really shocked at the information that was in there. I have to say this. I love Mel Gibson, physically and every other way, and my husband understands, okay? So I was really delighted that he played the assassin in that movie. It really did help me as far as showing, and it was a verification for me, even though it was a movie, how it's not a shameful thing to not remember what the heck just happened when a person's been reprogrammed or drugged or whatever, because some of these drugs are very powerful at wiping out memory. And yes, I have had hallucinatory experiences as well during scrambles. That was a verification for me, and I understand that Walter Boart was a consultant for that movie, so that made a lot of sense there. I guess one of the things that there was a couple things that bothered me, and they may have been minor things, but like where it showed the uncle of all the agencies that was trying to help him get out, and how they treated him so well and all. I've yet to find a survivor who's had such a pleasant experience with any of these agencies. I wish one did exist that was so benevolent. The way it showed that the guy that played Jonas, where it showed that this guy Jonas, who was Gibson's character's programmer, being like, a rogue or something like that,
right.
That he was setting up an operation using these guys that was not really connected to any agency anymore.
A loose cannon.
I thought that was pretty misleading because agencies are very much using MK survivors. Victims, I shouldn't say survivors. I did like the way that, I've watched La Femme Nikita or Nikita La Femme, whichever it is. I've watched several other movies, including The Long Kiss Goodnight, where it showed people who were supposed to be used as assassins by governments. La Femme Nikita, I believe that was France. The other one was here, U.S. It made them look very, not inhuman, but like, knock, knock, nobody's home, or like, they could do superhuman things almost. In real life, it's not that way. In real life, a lot of times, the victims, when they're not actually doing ops, they are total victims, totally at the mercy of their handlers, not knowing from one minute to the next if they're going to live, if they're ever going to be normal again mentally. So I really liked the way Gibson's character showed, the vulnerabilities that MK victims really do have. I also like the happy ending, and I hope a lot of us get to experience that eventually. I don't know. I got a number of contacts this last week, particularly about that movie. A number of MK survivors went to see it, just to see, how if there was any triggers in there or anything that would help them with their own recoveries. And I think their biggest concern was that, like with X-Files and like with Long Kiss Goodnight and several other movies and TV shows, it would make people think that we were getting our memories from these movies and shows. Now, I want to specify that I started remembering this stuff back in 91. A lot of other survivors, I have strongly encouraged them to write all their memories down in hand and then type it and store it on diskettes in a number of places so that they have proofs that they remembered this stuff before they ran into these types of external materials or shows or whatever. Right. So there is a concern there. But I also talked to a therapist who seems to see it as like an open door in the minds of many people in the public to understand that, yes, this stuff can go on, does go on, and how it is done. So there's a lot of mixed reactions in me and in other people in the survivor community about the movie, and I think it's going to take a while to see, what develops out of it. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, and most of the time I enjoyed it. And I thought it was just very, very well done.
Well, I was going to ask as well, what in a larger sense do you feel the effect of this film is going to be on the public's perception and knowledge of mind control?
Well, I think it was one of the most accurate things I've seen done yet on it, as far as the way things really are. So I think it was very, very, very helpful that way. Showing that, yes, people do such heinous activities with other human beings, yes. Like I said, the only thing that concerned me was they made it look so limited that very few people were doing it and very few people were victimized by it, and that was what concerned me the most.
Was there
the other concern I had was that, thank goodness, at the end they showed that this wasn't so, but through a lot of it, the guy that played the programmer named Jonas, he was trying to make it look like Mel Gibson's character was dangerous. And that has been stigmatism that a lot of former assassins have run across, like they'll be dangerous again. And that is not accurate, because once a person has dealt with their rage, which is how they are usually used to do assassinations, is triggered out and focused on specific targeted individuals. Once that rage has been dealt with, they're pretty neat people. And even while the rage is being dealt with, they are neat people. And they are very, very big assets to society. So showing an operative in such a humane way, I think, was a help to people with Delta programming in particular. I do wish that they had shown more about this character's childhood. They did allude to it several times, like when he talked about the weird school he had been to. It showed how he was switched to a little boy. But I wish they had brought that out more. That most MK assassins, or Delta-programmed MKs, have child alter states, and sometimes the child alter states are the parts that are called out to kill, because they have such pure, unswerving determination to do it. Sometimes the child parts have the most rage of all. So I wish there had been more information, but again, there simply wasn't enough time to put all that in there.
I think the biggest thing that bothered me about the whole film was the title itself, in that term is used in such a dismissive way, and for the public to then come across any other information about mind control, to kind of label it, oh, that's conspiracy theory, it's not happening, it's not real.
Point there. Yeah. I guess that didn't hit me, because this is, okay, a therapist who's been working with me asked me to go see it and warned me in advance about the gory parts, which helped. Although it really was surprisingly not gory at all as far as I was concerned, and I was very grateful for that. But she said, now, I want you to learn from this film what is paranoid and what is real fear. And at first I was really thrown off by the way he played an extremely paranoid person. And yet, towards the end, you realize that it all had a purpose and it all was legitimately based. So I don't know. People would have to know more, I think, to catch that, to understand that that may have been part of the message. I guess that was one of my concerns, too. People, if they're not educated, like, okay, one survivor went to see it in another state and said that the younger people were laughing at it most of the time, like it was a big joke. And she was very disturbed about that. I don't know. We're just going to have to see. It's going to take a while to see what kind of impact this has all across the board.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people that are not familiar with all of the issues around mind control, such as dissociation, that I don't think they would have gotten the full amount out of that picture.
Yeah, that's the main reason why I wish it had shown how he was programmed as a child.
Right.
I wish it had shown that, because then it would have made even more sense.
Kathleen, how do you think society has got to deal with this issue of this use of mind control for political and military purposes that seem to be corrupting society in a very profound way?
That is a huge question. I sit and think a lot about all this stuff. Sometimes I think if I were God or if I were Queen, a monarch, which is a little joke there, what would I do? I wish that there was, one of the things I've seen that happens anytime there's an investigation into this stuff, and I'll bring up more about that shortly, is that what they tend to do is put their people in leading up the investigation to where they'll allow so much information to come out but not the rest. That seemed to have happened during the mid-1970s when they were investigating the CIA, MK Ultra, and other illegalities, including assassinations, which of course the CIA denied. Mm-hmm. Except they admitted they tried to kill Castro, which Ted Turner is now best friends with, from what I understand. Strange world. I know that Blanche I can't even say her,
Shavusty, yep.
and Lynn Moss Sharman, I know that they are starting a real push to get an investigation, DC level, done into these illegalities. I have agreed to join that push. I understand that Lynn Moss Sharman is also starting a letter campaign and asking people to write their senators and other people in D.C. about, pushing for the investigation. I guess my only concern is I know so many senators and others that have tremendous influence there that, if I were God or whatever, I would set it up to where younger people, newer people in the Congress and such would be the ones to head up these investigations, people who are not so compromised. We'll see how far that goes. I guess, I don't know, we'll just have to see. I think that one of the things that happens a lot of times is people get so totally overwhelmed, which I'm sure they will if they hear or read this, and I apologize in advance, but this is like a one-shot deal for me to get all this information out at once. It's very overwhelming. If people are willing to accept the information, it is incredibly depressing for a while. It leaves them with feeling hopeless. And believe me, every survivor that has had to remember these things has also gone through these long-term struggles. But I think if people will learn to just deal with this information one piece at a time, get away from it for a while, do fun things, just recreate their minds in other ways, and come back to it, learn a little bit more, and then begin to look for more materials on these subjects. Information is available. There were several articles that came out during the hearings on MK Ultra and all, but not enough. But they are out there if someone's willing to research it. I think that the youth on up to adults need to be aware of what happened. It seems like this information is still suppressed in the mainstream media. That deeply concerns me. Now, I'm not saying a lot of the people who started up NASA are dead, okay? A lot of the people who taught CIA and Pentagon personnel this stuff are dead. A lot of the stuff is now being carried on by people who are criminally involved, at least partly by choice in all of these activities. But I think people need to be more educated and aware of how this influenced so much of this, the Nazi influence. I think that will help them to understand the historical progression of this, because then it's not such a shock. And then there is a reason to feel outraged and do something about it. Now, I want to say this, too. I am part German. I am proud of it. I am not anti-Teutonic belief systems or anything else. But I also believe that when a person immigrates to this country, as I do, I appreciate what's here. okay, and do not try to overthrow it. A lot of these people that did immigrate from Nazi Germany subscribed to Hitler's plan for world domination by the year 2000. There is a videotape that I found in Blockbusters that did verify that information. Now, what was interesting to me about that was there was no way Hitler could have lived that long, and yet he made that their goal. I've noticed with some of these people, they are so identified with the Nazi belief system that they will die promoting these plans. That is awfully scary to me. One young woman I knew in Atlanta was going to meetings there, very covert meetings, attended by young people with like skinhead affiliations, where there was, and I had several other witnesses verify this, that there was an actual leader, an adult that was meeting with them, coming over from Germany each week to meet with them and teach them the Nazi belief systems. I know young people who are skinheads, and I love them dearly, but I do not agree with their politics. And I do believe that there needs to be more information made available, and I do believe there needs to be hearings into the situation. Some of the people who are in the military and are in, like, let's say they were involved in certain activities and intelligence agencies and realized what was going on, they are very vehemently opposed to this Nazi stuff, and it was supposed to be part of Operation Clean Sweep, but I don't think it worked. I think there's been too much cover-up because of the connection to the CIA, to NASA, and all the rest, where they got their information from. What I would like to personally see is for these people just to start coming clean. And this is my personal opinion, and my personal opinion only. I think that there needs to be a time where some of these people are granted amnesty if they will fess up, and if they will make some kind of reparations for what they've done to survivors. A lot of survivors need information in order to heal. They need verification, and it is available, and I would like to see that happen as well. Now, some survivors would be extremely upset with me for even suggesting such a thing, and 2-3 years ago I would have too. But when I see how many people are dying or close to dying because of a lack of verification, is it worth holding on to that anger for? You know?
Do you think it's better to get the information out and to provide some kind of amnesty for the perpetrators rather than holding out to try to get some real justice?
Right. But I think that they should be made to serve some kind of reparation to survivors, whatever form. I think that they should also be strongly induced to get into some kind of therapy, personally. The other thing I really would like to see is for people to start understanding the needs of survivors presently, besides the need for verification. Just yesterday, I got the New American Legion magazine. My husband is 30 years retired airborne, so we keep kind of close to what's going on in that area. There was an article in there by a psychiatrist up in the Northeast who had been a young victim in a concentration camp in Germany. He just barely survived when the Allies came in and began giving them food and medical and psychiatric help. It broke my heart to read the shape he and his friends were in. He said that after they were released from the concentration camp, they walked for nearly a day down a road with no food, totally exhausted, in a total daze, I'm sure, probably in severe shock. They saw, it was a soldier using a bayonet to get some food out of one of his rations. The soldier saw them and gave him their food. The three men divided this one ration between themselves because to them it was survival. The soldier saw that and got some of the other soldiers to feed them from their rations as well. They gave of what they had for them so these other people could survive. I think that if a lot of people would just be willing to give a little bit of their time, of their energy, of their willingness to learn, even though it is painful and frightening and depressing information, they don't have to risk their lives for this. A lot of people are afraid to associate with some of this because they're afraid they're going to die or get hurt or their kids will get hurt or something. But if it doesn't take a full-fledged devotion to help us. A lot of survivors were not taught basic life skills. They were not taught how to socialize. A lot of them are financially struggling. They're just barely making it. Some of them cannot even afford therapy, which is essential for their recovery. Some of them seriously need to get a higher education. I'm very fortunate. My husband is 100% VA disabled because he has a deteriorating spine from over 300 parachute jumps in airborne. And so because he's 100% disabled, I have received, without realizing I was going to get it, what a joy. The government is still good for some things. 4 years free education in college. And this is so incredibly helpful to me because I am now able to build a future. I would eventually like to see some kind of scholarship set up, whether it has to be done by the private sector until survivors get what they deserve financially for what they've been through, so that other survivors also can begin to rebuild their lives. A lot of us, until we got out, that's all the life we had. I used to joke when I started remembering what I was used to do that, well, heck, I could always farm myself out as a bodyguard. But do I want to do that? Do I want to have to put myself in a risky situation again? I want to have other options for my future. I want to have much healthier, adrenaline-free options for a job or whatever. Now, I realize that because I go public, it's going to limit what I can do. But still, at least I have options. At least I can get an education and be around normal people and learn how to live a normal life. So many others are not as fortunate as I am. I would very much like to see them at least get funding for therapy, decent therapy, and for some kind of education. Some of them, like I understand in Canada, it's harder for some survivors to get therapy and or to get any kind of regular financial support. It's almost impossible for some of these survivors to be able to function on a job. Most of us suffer not just from dissociative disorders, but we also suffer from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and believe me, that is hell. Any Vietnam vet and a lot of World War II vets can tell you what that's like. So those are the things I would like to see accomplished, at least short-term, until some of the other situations with our government can be ironed out.
Kathleen, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us in this radio series. I realize that talking with us here is not without risk to you, and
yeah, I've had a couple things happen to me and my family this week, but actually we've gotten kind of used to it.
I wish you all the best.